Chapter 141. The three great Daoist schools are nothing more than this. Under the moonlight, Hu Zhon's entire body was surrounded by the white tiger divine mark. His eyes were like lightning, and his tall tiger body was like an insurmountable mountain, causing people to feel endless pressure. His words traveled far, echoing in the sky above the courtyard. Li Lingfeng and the others all paled. Li Mengyaro, Yi Chen, Zhu Yiqi, and the other Daoist disciples couldn't help but take a few steps forward, glaring at Hu Zhon. A fierce battle intent suddenly burst out from their bodies. What? Even your eldest senior brother isn't a match for him. Don't tell me you want to challenge our Lord Hu? The 5 young experts from the southern wasteland all stepped forward and sneered. The descendants of the Daoist schools are not as good as the elites of the southern wasteland. This is an indisputable fact. You guys should save your energy, another young expert from the southern wasteland said with disdain. What descendants of the Daoist schools? What a great title, but it turns out to be an undeserved reputation. Our Lord Hu alone is enough to sweep you all away. The young experts from the southern wasteland continued to attack the confidence of Li Mengyaro and the others. Li Lingfeng, Ren Wuming, and the others couldn't help but become mad after hearing this. Their eyes turned red. These people were really too despicable. Meanwhile, the faces of Li Mengyaro, Yi Chen, and the others became extremely ugly. The sword on Li Mengyao's back was buzzing and trembling. It seemed like it could soar into the sky at any time and turn into a flying sword. The piercingly cold sword aura caused the expressions of the young experts from the southern wasteland to change. Who said that the descendants of the Daoist schools have an undeserved reputation? At this moment, a majestic voice came from afar. Although this voice wasn't very loud, it was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. The few young people from the southern wasteland were stunned and stopped talking. Under the night sky, a white shadow flew past the many palaces and pavilions, heading towards this place. Before the person arrived, a great pressure as heavy as a mountain had already surged over. When Li Lingfeng heard this voice, a hint of joy appeared on his face. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and retrieved the purple gold 8 trigrams that was sent flying by Hu Zhon. And the flying sword that was also sent flying by Hu Zhon was also returned to its scabbard by Ren Wuming. In the face of absolute power, magical treasures, flying swords, and Dao techniques were all difficult to resist. Hu Zhon had used absolute power to defeat the most outstanding disciple of the younger generation of the 3 great Daoist sects. However, at this moment, Hu Zhon, who was standing in the middle of the dried-up lake, was unable to be happy. Because a figure that emitted terrifying fluctuations, had already arrived nearby. He felt threatened from this figure. Hu Zhon, who had the bloodline of the ancient white tiger Saint King flowing in his veins, was much more sensitive to danger than ordinary people. Shua. An indistinct silhouette appeared by the lake. The silhouette quickly became clearer. This was a dark-skinned man dressed in a white robe. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyebrows were long enough to reach his temples. His eyes were as bright as the stars, but his deep gaze was like an abyss, unable to see the bottom. He did not have a breathtakingly handsome appearance, but the outline of his face gave others a feeling of incomparable unswerving determination. This was a powerful man, and his aura was somewhat similar to that of Hu Zhon. Who was the one who said those words just now? Who said that the successor of the Daoist sect has an undeserved reputation? This dark-skinned man was the reinforcement that Ziyu had brought, Jiyu Fei. Jiyu Fei's razor-sharp gaze swept across the faces of the young experts of the southern wasteland. The young experts of the southern wasteland immediately felt their hearts tremble, as if they were being stared at by a peerless, ferocious beast. Jiyu Fei's gaze made it difficult for them to look directly at him. No one dared to stand out. Gui Teng's expression also changed at this moment. As for the other 5 young people, other than a slender man with long purple hair, who did not reveal any expression of fear, the other 4 young people were all trembling with fear. Under the intense gaze of Jiyu Fei, they actually revealed cowardly expressions. Weren't you all clamoring just now? Why have you all become mute now? Yi Chen, the disciple of the Shangqing sect, took a step forward and loudly shouted while pointing at the southern wasteland disciples opposite him. When the 4 Southern Wasteland disciples heard this, they couldn't help but reveal a trace of awkwardness and panic. Hu Zhan and Gui Ting also felt a wave of displeasure. On the other hand, the young man in purple still had a calm expression. The moment Ji Yufei arrived, he had already instantly identified that there were 3 very powerful people among the Southern Wasteland disciples. He couldn't help but be secretly shocked. The Southern Wasteland was indeed a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Among the 3 people, one was a tall and sturdy young man with a white shawl that was as ferocious as a tiger. The other was a yellow-faced young man who was less than 5 feet tall, had a pair of hands that almost hung down to his knees, a pointy forehead, and a seemingly hunchback. As for the last one, it was the young man in purple with a dignified appearance. The skinny, hunchback young man was Gui Teng. The young man in purple didn't reveal his identity. He seemed to be very low-key and mixed in with the 4 people. Until now, he had been watching coldly from the sidelines as if this matter had nothing to do with him and had no intention of making a move. Just at this moment, Ji Yufei's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly turned around and looked towards a pavilion in the distance. His eyes had already narrowed into a line, and within his eyes, there was a flicker of light. Damn! Dong Fanglong, who was in the pavilion, was greatly shocked. He didn't even think and immediately turned to rush out from the back of the pavilion, wanting to flee. He originally wanted to watch the battle between Ji Yufei and the disciples of the Southern Wasteland coldly. However, Ji Yufei had already sensed his presence. He knew that if he didn't leave now, his life would be in danger. Brother Dongfang. The Crown Prince, Yang Zun, who was beside Dong Fanglong, couldn't help but be shocked when he saw Dong Fanglong suddenly turning around and leaving without saying a word. However, just when Yang Zun wanted to urge Dong Fanglong to stay, a cold killing intent gushed forth, causing his entire body to tremble. This feeling was like being stared at by a venomous snake. His entire body turned cold as a terrifying pressure appeared in his heart. Swish! Ji Yufei's silhouette instantly vanished from his original location. A gust of wind appeared out of nowhere and gushed forth. Everyone was shocked. Hu Zhan even thought that Ji Yufei was going to act against those silk pants. His countenance involuntarily changed. Roar! A tiger's roar shook the heavens and earth. The image of a white tiger appeared. Hu Zhan was like a peerless ferocious tiger as he ferociously pounced out from the lake. Boom! With a loud bang, everyone felt the ground violently quaking. Hu Zhan had instantly traversed over a distance of several dozens of meters and directly pounced down from the sky, blocking in front of those silk pants. Although those silk pants were ignorant and incompetent, relying on the power of their clans, they ran amok in Dragon Emperor City. If it was in normal times, Hu Zhan wouldn't even care about them. However, tonight was different from the past. If these guys were injured by someone else, he would also lose face. Gui Teng and the purple-haired young man instantly prepared for battle. Streaks of blue energy surrounded Gui Teng's body, and a huge black tortoise's image was faintly discernible in the water-like energy waves, emitting a terrifying wave that was as heavy as a mountain. However, the purple youth's battle form was very strange. On his back, there was a pair of purple energy wings. It was as if he could soar into the sky and fly above the 9 heavens in the next moment. However, they were wrong. Ji Yufei was not going to attack those good-for-nothings. Instead, he was going to use the 8 desolation steps and chase after Dong Fanglong with the speed of the 8 desolation steps. Swish! 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 Like a phantom, Ji Yufei flitted across the void as if he had teleported. In an instant, he arrived at the bottom of the pavilion. At this moment, Dong Fanglong had just rushed out from the back of the pavilion. Dong Fanglong didn't even look back. Instead, he directly rushed forward. He was very clear that he was definitely not able to defeat Ji Yufei. Ji Yufei flew up and directly leaped over the pavilion. He immediately caught sight of Dong Fanglong, who was escaping in the rockery in the garden. Dong Fanglong, die! With a loud shout, Ji Yufei descended from the sky like a god descending to the mortal world. The 5 elements extermination seal was displayed between his hands. A glaring aura that was like raging flames suddenly surged out from the seal that Ji Yufei had formed. This was the fire seal of the 5 elements extermination seal. Vast yuan qi rippled out, and the power of the fire element was like a surging river, rushing down from the sky, sweeping towards Dongfang Long. This wasn't a real flame, but the power of fire that Ji Yufei had used to communicate with the 5 elements inside and outside. This was the combination of martial and Tao. The terrifyingly high temperature could melt gold and melt iron. The all-encompassing fire seemed to want to ignite the void. The grass, trees, and rocks below all crumbled into the tiniest dust and dissipated into the air. Dongfang Long, who was shrouded in raging flames, sensed the terrifying power that surged down from the sky, and immediately felt a sense of powerlessness in his heart. Ji Yufei, whose cultivation had greatly improved, was really too powerful. In the distance, the expert of the White Tiger clan, Hu Zhon, couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart when he saw this scene. "Haha. You want to kill me? You, Ji Yufei, don't have that qualification. The next time we meet, I will definitely chop off your head." A scroll unfolded in Dongfang Long's hand, and the power of the Tao immediately surged out from the scroll. A water-blue light screen immediately enveloped Dongfang Long. In the next moment, the space that was enveloped by the light screen trembled. Swoosh! The light faded, and Dongfang Long disappeared into thin air. Rumble! The fire covered the sky and the earth, and fiercely swooped down, enveloping the place where Dongfang Long was originally standing. The earth trembled, and all the tangible things that were enveloped by the blazing aura were all turned into dust. Outrageous! It's another scroll of the Tao of space. A figure shrouded in raging flames walked out from the sea of fire. The surging power of fire, following his footsteps, retreated like the tide, and entered into his body. Behind Ji Yufei, a garden was completely burned, and a pitch-black pit with a diameter of 10 feet was revealed on the ground, and it was still emitting smoke. It was black, and that was the scorched earth. There's another person in the pavilion. Ji Yufei inclined his head and glanced at the pavilion in front of him. Swoosh! His silhouette directly disappeared from where he stood. Sigh! On the pavilion, the crown prince, Yang Zun, involuntarily drew in a breath of cold air when he saw this scene. After that, he turned and fled. His martial arts were also quite outstanding. With a flash of his silhouette, he had already rushed to the window, and was about to directly jump down from the pavilion. However, before he could jump, he felt the back of his neck being grabbed by 5 fingers, and he was lifted up, his feet leaving the ground. At this moment, Yang Zun felt the aura of death. And at this moment, an old man dressed in green silently appeared on the pavilion. "Young man, don't be rash. Do you know who he is?" That old man spoke. "MHM? This person." Ji Yufei turned his head and glanced at the old man. Although he appeared calm on the surface, he was incomparably shocked in his heart. He was secretly on guard. Even with his sharp spiritual sense, which had awakened the 9th heavenly layer, he actually couldn't sense the appearance of this old man. An expert at the transcending mortality realm? Ji Yufei felt the threat from the old man. Chapter 142. I don't care who he is. Since his Dongfang Long's friend, his Ji Yufei's enemy. The best way to deal with enemies is to destroy them completely. How shuck. Ji Yufei lifted Yang Zun like he was grabbing a little chick as he spoke in a sinister tone. Yang Zun's neck was grabbed by Ji Yufei and he couldn't move at all. He couldn't even speak. At this moment, he was extremely embarrassed and enraged to the extreme. No matter what, he was the crown prince of the Southern Desolate Prefecture King. In the future, he would inherit the title of the Southern Desolate Prefecture King. How could someone as arrogant as him not feel ashamed and enraged after being humiliated like this? He's the eldest son of the Southern Desolate Prefecture King, Yang Yuandao. If you kill him, it'll be very troublesome. The green-robed old man calmly spoke. He didn't seem to be anxious at all. Ji Yufei couldn't help but frown when he heard this. To think that it was this fellow who gave him the invitation. It seemed like the commotion tonight was definitely caused by this fellow, and Dongfang Long. Ji Yufei had already guessed most of the situation, that Dongfang Long merely wanted to borrow Yang Zun's strength to deal with him. Despicable bastard, if he lands in my hands, I'll definitely make him beg for death. Ji Yufei had never hated someone so much before. Dongfang Long was the first. Ji Yufei, I, Hu Zhon, challenge you now. If you have the guts, don't be a coward. An insolent voice rang out from outside the pavilion. Damn it, who is this Hu Zhon? Ji Yufei wasn't present earlier and didn't know where Hu Zhon came from. However, there was no need to doubt Hu Zhon's strength. You're the expert protecting this fellow in the dark? Ji Yufei's eyes were deep and cold. At this moment, he was glaring at the green-robed old man. You can say that. The old man replied. Me. Ji Yufei coldly laughed. He didn't say anything else and directly threw Yang Zun towards the green-robed old man like a broken sack. Just like what the green-robed old man had said, if he killed Yang Zun, he would be in great trouble. After all, the overlord of Dragon Emperor City was Yang Yuandao. If Zhong Tai killed his son, Yang Yuandao would never let it go. The power behind the southern desolate prefecture king was Yang Country, a super empire with a territory of 10,000 miles. If he offended the royal clan of Yang Country because of killing Yang Zun, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. The green-robed old man stretched out his hand and caught Yang Zun. After that, he directly leaped out of the pavilion like a wisp of smoke, silently disappearing into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he vanished into the night sky. It was as if the people outside the pavilion did not notice the old man's appearance and departure. It seemed that the people outside did not notice the old man's appearance or his departure. Even Ji Yufei, who had already broken into the awakened ninth heaven, found it hard to see through the depth of this old man. This old man's cultivation was a lot stronger than Beitang Yi from the Beitang clan. He should be on the same level as Zhao Xuanji. Ji Yufei knew how terrifying Zhao Xuanji was. Ji Yufei knew that even if he met Zhao Xuanji now, he might not be able to contend against him and could only retreat. Of course, with Ji Yufei's current strength that was comparable to a cultivator who had just entered the ascended mortality stage, he was confident that he could retreat even if he couldn't defeat Zhao Xuanji. Good. Among the practitioners of the younger generation, there has never been anyone who dares to ignore me, Hu Zhon. Ji Yufei, you are the first. Hu Zhon's cold words came from outside the building. His words were filled with rage. Ji Yufei looked out of the window and saw a dozen people gathered in front of the pavilion. They were divided into two camps, one for the young cultivators of the southern desolate prefecture, and the other for the three great Dao sects. The one standing in front of the southern desolate prefecture cultivators was the white-haired young man. The white-haired young man coldly snorted and directly punched forward. A violent force suddenly erupted like a volcano. White tiger runes condensed in front of his fist to form a huge white tiger, which fiercely pounced toward Ji Yufei. Howshuck when the white tiger appeared, a strong wind rose. Its ferocious power was unfathomable, and an extremely fierce killing intent filled the air. Everyone quickly retreated to the distance. In a battle between two great experts, it would not be worth it if they were careless and ended up in a disaster. Ji Yufei's feet stepped on the ground, and his body suddenly shot into the sky like an arrow. With a boom, he directly broke a big hole in the roof of the pavilion and rushed out. In the instant that Ji Yufei rushed out of the pavilion, a huge tremor came from below. In the midst of a muffled rumble, dust soared into the sky. The ferocious white tiger condensed from the unparalleled fist energy actually completely collapsed the entire pavilion in an instant. 8 steps 8 kills. Ji Yufei shouted in a deep voice. He directly stepped out in the air. Swoosh. With a swoosh sound, he left an afterimage in his original position and instantly appeared above Hu Zhon's head. He took a step towards Hu Zhon's head. A terrifying force was vast and mighty under Ji Yufei's feet. It was as if a huge mountain was descending from the sky, causing Hu Zhon's expression to instantly change. Ji Yufei's strength made him feel a great pressure. The temperament of Ji Yufei and Hu Zhon were somewhat similar. Both of them were extremely powerful figures, and both of them were similarly belligerent. When these two people met, brilliant sparks were bound to appear. Roar! Hu Zhon roared, and the white tiger divine crest rushed out of his body. His tall body was as if it was cast from iron, and it was incomparably domineering. He directly smashed his fist upwards, and a resplendent white light lit up the night sky. The terrifying force went against the sky and attacked. Boom! A loud sound shook the heavens, and the surging force shook the heaven and earth. The resplendent and dazzling light was so dazzling that everyone couldn't open their eyes. The huge wave of air that exploded out caused the sky to seem like it was blowing up, and an enormous pressure enveloped all directions. Rumble. The ground under Hu Zhan's feet instantly shattered, and the soil fragments scattered in all directions. The spectators cried out in surprise and dodged even further away. The ground was directly stomped by Hu Zhan, and a huge pit with a diameter of 15 meters was directly formed. As for Ji Yufei, he instead soared into the sky, and he was blasted high up into the sky by the explosive force. At the same time, his second step was immediately taken downwards. Swoosh! Like teleportation, Ji Yufei instantly closed in on top of Hu Zhan's head. Rumble. Under Ji Yufei's feet, there was a dull sound of wind and thunder. Compared to the previous step, this second step was even stronger, fiercer, and more terrifying. The space under Ji Yufei's feet trembled. 8 desolate steps, 8 steps, 8 kills. Every step he took, the force would superimpose with the force of the previous step, wave after wave. It was truly a killing technique. White Tiger Emperor's Fist. Hu Zhan shouted in a deep voice. His face was solemn, and the white tiger divine crest on his right fist unceasingly revolved, bursting out with resplendent light. When he punched out, it was like a meteor streaking across the sky. That indomitable tyrannical momentum made everyone's heart palpitate. Boom! With another loud sound, Hu Zhan's fist and Ji Yufei's foot instantly collided. Where they collided, ripples spread out. That was a terrifying destructive force. But the ripples spread out, and everywhere they passed, the ground collapsed. The soil and stones silently turned into dust. It was extremely terrifying. The extremely compressed force exploded. This force was too strong, it shook the heaven and earth. Hu Zhan continuously took 3 steps back, and the powerful rebounding force was directed to his feet, and then to the ground. With every step Hu Zhan took, the ground under his feet would tremble. Hideous cracks spread out from his feet, and the nearby buildings all cracked and collapsed. Ji Yufei flew hundreds of feet back. Before he landed, he flipped over, and both his feet forcefully supported himself on a fake mountain. Boom! The fake mountain under his feet instantly exploded, and Ji Yufei used this force to support himself again, and fiercely rushed towards Hu Zhan. Hu Zhan's expression changed. He coldly looked at Ji Yufei, who was rushing over, and indifferently wiped away the trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, then took a deep breath. Hu Zhan's abdomen suddenly swelled up, his face flushed red, and the veins on his forehead throbbed. His abdomen was like a pregnant woman who was 10 months pregnant. 8 steps to the extreme, Ji Yufei's movement speed was extremely fast. He left behind a series of afterimages in the void, emitting a mighty pressure, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Hu Zhan. Ji Yufei was about to make a move. Roar! At this moment, Hu Zhan let out a roar that shook the heavens and the earth. In the void, ripples visible to the naked eye appeared. Everyone present, including Ji Yufei, could not hear any sound in their ears in that instant. The heavens and the earth seemed to have suddenly become silent. It was absolute silence. The white tiger roared at the sky, and its ferocious might dominated the heavens and the earth. This kind of terrifying sound wave could destroy everything, and it could not be resisted. The sound of killing was formless, but it could cause terrifying damage to people. The sound of killing intent that covered the heavens and the earth instantly enveloped the charging Ji Yufei. Ji Yufei roared, and covered his ears with both hands as he flew backwards. The terrifying sound wave destroyed everything, shattered everything, and strangled everything. Not only did it cause Ji Yufei to suffer a great impact, but the surrounding rocks and plants also turned into dust silently like snowflakes. The earth trembled violently, undulating like waves, and did not calm down for a long time. Boom! The flying Ji Yufei directly smashed through a fake mountain, and then smashed through a half-collapsed pavilion before stopping his retreat. The sound was silent, and the great Tao was formless. Although this tiger roar sound killing technique was not directed at the spectators, not a single person present was spared. All of them instantly lost their hearing, and felt a splitting headache, as if thousands of heavy hammers were pounding on their heads. It was extremely unbearable. Apart from Li Lingfeng and the other Taoism disciples, Gui Teng of the Black Tortoise clan of the Southern Wilderness, and the purple-haired young man who could still barely hold on, the 4 profligate sons of the Southern Wilderness had already fallen to the ground when the sound wave appeared, rolling around in pain. Seeing the 4 fellows in such a sorry state, Gui Teng could not help but feel ashamed. Only the purple-haired young man still had a calm expression, as if it had nothing to do with him. Chapter 143. The power of the Tiger Roar sonic kill was extremely terrifying. The destructive sound wave could destroy everything. Ji Yufei, who was caught off guard, was directly blown away and his divine soul was shaken. The terrifying sound wave made him suffer a great impact. His 6 senses were shaken violently, especially his ears. For a moment, Ji Yufei couldn't hear anything. Even when he saw things, he could only see double. Roar. Ji Yufei immediately operated the Shen Qi in his body to protect his entire body and stabilize his 6 senses. The power of the 5 elements circulated in his body, instantly relieving the discomfort in his body. Whoosh! At that instant, a gust of wind blew at Ji Yufei's face, raising a cloud of dust. The ferocious aura in the wind made Ji Yufei feel threatened. Retreat! Without any hesitation, Ji Yufei decisively retreated. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The ground trembled violently. The ground where he was standing was shattered and turned into a huge pit in an instant. It was as if he was hit by a meteorite that fell from the sky. A tall figure walked out of the pit. White tiger divine runes circled around his body. His imposing figure exuded a majestic aura. Bai Feiwu's tiger eyes were filled with endless ferocity. No one dared to look at him directly. Hu Zhon of the White Tiger clan, this young expert who was like a fierce tiger, actually displayed a disdainful aura. Seeing this, Ji Yufei's pupils shrank. This Hu Zhon is definitely a rare opponent. Unfortunately, he will become my whetstone. Hu Zhon, the Southern Wasteland expert, was only in his early 20s. However, he already had a peerless cultivation base that allowed him to look down on his peers. His tall body seemed to be made of steel, giving people an extremely strong feeling. His bronze-colored skin shone brilliantly. That was the bloodline of the ancient holy beast, the white tiger, emitting a strong power, making people feel that he was strong and terrifying. The might of the ancient holy beast made people tremble from the bottom of their hearts. Compete. Is this crazy tiger going to risk his life? Gui Teng, the young expert of the Black Tortoise clan, who was watching the battle from afar, said. At this moment, even the mysterious young man in purple revealed a trace of nervousness, and his eyes were filled with splendor. As for Li Lingfeng and the rest, they were watching the scene in the distance nervously. No one knew better than them how powerful Hu Zhon was. The white tiger mystical ability could be said to be invincible among those of the same level. Li Lingfeng, the eldest senior brother of the Taishen sect, Ren Wuming, the eldest senior brother of the Guangqing Celestial sect, and the eldest senior brother of the Shangqing sect represented the strongest of the younger generation of the 3 great Daoist sects. But even with the 3 of them working together and using all their treasures, they were still defeated by Hu Zhon's white tiger's ferocious might. This was enough to show how terrifying Hu Zhon was. The successors of the Dao sect all broke out in cold sweat for Ji Yufei. Guangqing's junior, Li Mengyaro, bit her lower lip and clenched her fists tightly. Her beautiful eyes, which were filled with endless spirit, looked at Ji Yufei nervously. Junior brother Ji Yufei will definitely win, Ziyu murmured. He was very confident in Ji Yufei. After all, to Ziyu, Ji Yufei's strength was unparalleled among those of the same age. In the 9 vein trials, Ji Yufei's majestic appearance of obtaining first place had long been deeply imprinted in Ziyu's mind. As a level 8 awakening plane cultivator, he defeated Li Lingfeng, a level 9 eldest senior brother. This was something that had never happened in the Taishen sect. Ziyu believed that nothing was impossible when it came to Ji Yufei. Roar. At this moment, a loud roar came from the field. Hu Zhon's white hair danced wildly, and 2 terrifying rays of light shone from his eyes. He was wild and incomparably ferocious, and his appearance was frightening to the extreme. Peng! Hu Zhan's shirt instantly exploded, turning into thousands of pieces that danced in the air. Tiger stripes began to appear on his naked upper body. They were the white tiger divine tattoos. You're very strong. You're the first person to make me use my full strength. Hu Zhan's eyes flickered with a fierce light as he stared at Ji Yufei and said in a low voice. His sharp and forceful eyes revealed a trace of imperceptible madness. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Could it be that in the previous battle, Hu Zhan held back? He didn't use his full strength. If that was really the case, then this Hu Zhan was really too terrifying. Is that so? You're not bad yourself. At this moment, Ji Yufei's six senses, which had been thrown into chaos by Hu Zhan's shocking roar, had already gradually recovered. Next, you must be prepared to die, because even I cannot completely control this power. Hu Zhan's strength was unparalleled, and his murderous aura filled the sky. His words were not a threat, but the truth. Very good. Thank you for the reminder. Ji Yufei did not have any expression because he would not hold back either. He just happened to use this Hu Zhan to verify the 5 elements annihilation seal technique that he had just comprehended. Divine tiger form. Bloodline awakening. Hu Zhan let out a loud roar that shook the heavens and earth. The white tiger divine tattoo appeared on his body. This time, the divine tattoo did not rush out from his body. The white tiger divine tattoo began to emit a dazzling divine light. Every divine tattoo emitted a vast and mighty energy wave. At this moment, everyone had an illusion that Hu Zhan seemed to have turned into a peerless, ferocious tiger. A horrifying and violent aura swept out. The space where Hu Zhan was at began to tremble, as if a prehistoric giant beast had awakened in his body. His entire body was covered with dragon-like muscles, and a layer of dazzling brilliance flowed on his skin. His aura was monstrous and invincible. Yes, the current Hu Zhan gave off a shocking feeling of invincibility. He seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth with every step he took. This is his true strength. Not only Li Lingfeng and the other successors of the 3 great Dao sects, but also the southern wilderness cultivators who were present were all shocked by the scene in front of them. Ji Yufei's expression also became incomparably solemn. He felt a great pressure from Hu Zhan's body. Whoosh! The dust on the ground suddenly rose up, and then spread in all directions. Without any warning, Hu Zhan disappeared from where he stood. Ji Yufei's eyelids twitched. So fast. Without thinking too much, Ji Yufei's mind could no longer keep up with the rhythm of his movements. Instinctively, he threw a punch forward to block. A dazzling golden aura appeared in front of his fist, and then surged forward like a surging river. This was not a theurgy, nor was it a Daoist technique. It was a power that originated from martial. It was this kind of most direct power that shook the heavens and earth in front of him. A strong wind swept out with Ji Yufei as the center, sweeping up the dust and even the shattered mountain rocks at his feet. Boom! It was like a muffled thunder coming from the horizon. The sound was not loud, but it was equally shocking. The explosive power tore through the void, and the air also exploded. A tiger claw, a real tiger claw with flesh and blood, violently collided with Ji Yufei's fist, which was as resplendent as the sun. The two figures flew back like lightning, and then immediately pounced at each other. Roar! The white tiger roared to the sky, and divine markings appeared. A huge tiger claw surrounded by the divine markings of the white tiger directly slammed down at Ji Yufei. Under the tiger claw, a strong wind blew, and the powerful force shook the void. 8 desolation steps, 8 extreme step. Ji Yufei used the 8 desolation steps, and transformed into an extremely faint light shadow. In an instant, he rushed out from under the tiger claw. 5 elements extermination, all things exterminate. Mysterious seals were formed between Ji Yufei's hands, and a 5-colored light appeared on his body. The seals formed between Ji Yufei's hands seemed to communicate with the 5 elements of heaven and earth, drawing in the power of the 5 elements of heaven and earth, and annihilating it towards Hu Zhan. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, the 5 elements interacted, reinforcing and restraining each other, forming a terrifying power that could exterminate everything. Ji Yufei displayed the terrifying battle technique of technique nearing Dao. The power of the 5 elements flowed between his hands, but they were clearly separated. There was no fusion of the power, only the impact of the power. When the power collided with each other, the power displayed was even more terrifying than a single power. Bang! Hu Zhan was directly sent flying. Everyone was shocked and dumbfounded. The unparalleled Hu Zhan was actually sent flying. This was simply unbelievable. How is this possible? Gui Teng murmured. He knew that Hu Zhan had already used his trump card. The power of the bloodline awakening could definitely nearly double Hu Zhan's strength. A doubling of strength, what kind of concept was that? Gui Teng did not dare to imagine, but Hu Zhan was still sent flying. This was an indisputable fact. This person called Ji Yufei. Gui Ting could not help but feel fear towards Ji Yufei. Junior brother Ji Yu, good job. Ziyu could not help but shout. Seeing that Ji Yufei had the upper hand, the crowd of Dao Gate disciples was extremely excited. The battle between Ji Yufei and Hu Zhan was related to the reputation of the 3 great Dao Gates. At this moment, the descendants of the 3 great Dao Gates temporarily put aside their sectarian bias and cheered for Ji Yufei together. However, the expressions of the southern wilderness cultivators at the scene were not so good. Swoosh! Ji Yufei's movement technique was as fast as lightning. In the next moment, he was in front of Hu Zhan again. Without any words, he directly formed a seal. Earth element seal technique. The power of the thick earth surged between Ji Yufei's hands. Grey air waves, like waves, drowned Hu Zhan in an instant. The grey air enveloped the surroundings. Ji Yufei seemed to have connected with the earth. With his own earth element power, he communicated with the earth element power of heaven and earth, guiding the endless thick earth chi of the earth to obliterate Hu Zhan. Under the envelopment of the thick earth chi, Hu Zhan roared again and again. Indistinctly, one could see a white tiger pouncing ferociously under the grey brilliance, setting off endless ferocious might. Hu Zhan roared. With a pair of tiger claws, he directly tore apart the seal of the earth element power and rushed out from the envelopment of the grey air. The white tiger divine marks emitted a dazzling divine light. In the next moment, the white tiger divine marks rushed out of Hu Zhan's body and turned into light blades, slashing towards Ji Yufei in an overwhelming manner. Every light blade was like a heavenly blade, emitting a vast and terrifying energy wave. As they hurriedly slashed across the void, an extremely dense sound of tearing through the air could be heard. 5 elements as one, break all divine powers. Ji Yufei lightly shouted. He completely ignored the thousands of light blades that were slashing towards him. He directly formed a seal and temporarily combined the power of the 5 elements into one, unleashing the strongest power he could currently display. With the 5 elements annihilation seal, Ji Yufei could temporarily combine the 5 elements, but he could only maintain it for an extremely short period of time. If he wanted to truly use the battle technique of combining the 5 elements as one, unless he broke through to the transcending mortality realm, it was absolutely difficult to do so. A short period of combining the 5 elements as one was already Ji Yufei's limit. He could not maintain it for long. The power of combining the 5 elements as one was unimaginable. As Ji Yufei formed a profound seal, a terrifying energy storm filled with the aura of destruction surged out from his hand seal. At this moment, the heavens and earth trembled. Hu Zhan felt a great danger. All the hair on his body instantly stood on end. This was an extreme crisis that was enough to endanger his life. Rumble. The energy storm of combining the 5 elements as one directly shattered the light blades formed by the white tiger divine marks. Ji Yufei's hands formed a profound seal that streaked across the sky like a meteor, instantly imprinting itself onto Hu Zhan's chest. Bang! Chapter 144. You may be strong, but I'm stronger than you. Ji Yufei displayed his powerful battle prowess. He strode towards Hu Zhan, who was blown away. His words were filled with confidence. Everyone was shocked by the power he displayed. On the internet, a powerful person must have powerful abilities. This was undeniable. Hu Zhan was undoubtedly powerful, but it was a pity that he met Ji Yufei. The outcome of this battle seemed to have been decided long ago. Ji Yufei wasn't a cultivator, nor was he a divine arts practitioner. He was a martial artist. A martial artist who had cultivated successfully would find it hard to find a worthy opponent among the same level cultivators. This wasn't a lie. The current Gu Fei even had the ability to fight against a cultivator who had just entered the transcending mortality realm. In the awakened Nine Heavens, no one had such heaven-defying battle prowess. However, as a martial artist, Gu Fei's battle prowess was heaven-defying. It made it possible for him to challenge a higher-level cultivator. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 8 desolate steps, 8 extreme steps. Gu Fei seemed to have teleported. Everywhere he passed, he left behind after images. In just an instant, he caught up to Hu Zhan. Roar. Hu Zhan tried his best to stop his retreat, but he still couldn't help but retreat. The power of the 5 elements as one was too strong. Even if he used all his strength to block it, it was hard to resolve. Although the power of the 5 elements as one could only be released in an extremely short period of time and couldn't be sustained for long, it was enough to heavily injure Hu Zhan, causing him to spit mouthfuls of blood. Boom! Hu Zhan directly smashed a huge hole in the high wall of the courtyard. He rushed out of the courtyard, and the brick fragments scattered in all directions. Wood element mudra technique, 10,000 purple wood. Gu Fei chased out from the hole in the high wall with his extreme movement technique. When he got close to Hu Zhan, the wood element mudra of the 5 elements extermination mudra had already formed. The incomparably profound mudra technique was pressed forward. A terrifying energy wave suddenly exploded like a volcano. A bluish-green aura surged out from the mudra technique and swept forward. The 5 elements extermination seal art had already touched upon the Tao. The edge of the wood seal was the embodiment of the martial way. The moment Gu Fei's wood seal appeared, it was as if his own wood elemental power had connected with the essence of the plants in the world. Within the jade-green light, there seemed to be a dense, endless stretch of giant wood that rushed towards Hu Zhan. Bang! Hu Zhan was sent flying out once more. Roar! Hu Zhan, who had fallen to the ground, pretended to be crazy. He was like a ferocious beast that had reached a dead end. He roared at the sky, and a torrential force surged out from his body. Hu Zhan wildly danced about, and his eyes gradually became blood-red, flickering with a crazed blood-red light. Whoosh! Hu Zhan pounced directly at Gu Fei. He didn't use any divine ability, nor did he put up any defense. His movements were actually like those of a ferocious beast. Was he courting death? The spectators from afar were shocked by Hu Zhan's crazy actions. However, Gui Teng of the Black Tortoise clan frowned at this moment. He thought of a terrifying matter. Could it be? Gui Teng's expression was extremely grave as he stared at the seemingly crazy Hu Zhan. 8 desolation steps. With a single step, Gu Fei directly sent the ferocious pouncing Hu Zhan flying. What's going on? Gu Fei felt that something was wrong. Roar! Hu Zhan, who had rolled on the ground, let out another roar and crawled up from the ground. He didn't seem to be injured, but the vast energy fluctuations coming from his body had become even stronger. Oh no, the power in his body is really starting to go out of control. Gui Teng's expression was extremely ugly. He knew the consequences of losing control of his power. That was the power that originated from the bloodline of the ancient sacred beast, the white tiger. Even though the white tiger bloodline in Hu Zhan's body had been passed down for so long and had become extremely thin, the power was still extremely powerful and terrifying. If it went out of control, the consequences would be very serious. This was because, apart from the power that originated from the bloodline, there was also the ferocious bestial nature of the ancient sacred beast, the white tiger. Once the power that originated from the white tiger bloodline went out of control, the bestial nature in the bloodline would also erupt. In this way, his human nature would be replaced by the bestial nature in the bloodline, and he would turn into a ferocious tiger in human form. His power would also rise to a terrifying level. Haushuk roar! Hu Zhan roared incessantly like a ferocious tiger. From the frenzy in his eyes, it could be seen that the bestial nature had already completely taken over his mind. Hu Zhan, who was controlled by the bestial nature, became extremely berserk. At this moment, The white tiger divine tattoo on his body emitted an unprecedentedly powerful light. Vast power surged out from Hu Zhan's body wave after wave, forming a terrifying energy storm around him. Roar. After a crazy roar, a blood-red ferocious light shot out from Hu Zhan's eyes. In the next moment, he leapt high into the air, and like a ferocious tiger pouncing on its prey, he hurriedly pounced towards Ji Yufei. The vast and mighty astral wind assaulted his face, causing pain, as if he was being cut by a sharp knife. At this moment, Hu Zhan was more powerful than ever before, and more dangerous than ever before. It was as if he had transformed into a ferocious tiger that only knew how to kill, and he viewed Ji Yufei as his prey. The terrifying energy waves caused Ji Yufei's heart to tremble. Streams of divine light that revolved around Hu Zhan's body made Ji Yufei feel danger. That kind of divine light was as dazzling as a sword immortal's flying sword. It was formed by the white tiger divine tattoo. Wherever the divine light passed, it left behind a pitch-black trace, as if the void was being torn apart. That was the terrifying power contained within the white tiger bloodline. At this moment, it burst out. Compared to when Hu Zhan was awake and transformed the white tiger divine tattoo into thousands of light blades, it was unknown how many times more powerful it was. Whoosh! Ji Yufei left behind an afterimage on his original spot, and hurriedly retreated. Boom! The afterimage was instantly destroyed, and the ground was completely turned into dust by the terrifying power. The crazy Hu Zhan, with a pounce, shook the heaven and earth. Hu Zhan, who was dominated by his bestial nature and had lost his rationality, only had bestial instincts at this moment. How could he still be Ji Yufei's opponent? Ji Yufei directly appeared behind him, and a hand knife chopped towards the back of Hu Zhan's neck. Don't harm his life. Just as Ji Yufei's hand knife was about to chop Hu Zhan, a loud shout suddenly came from the side. Then, Ji Yufei felt an extremely cold gust of wind assaulting his body from behind. At the same time, a violent power rushed towards Ji Yufei like a raging sea. Someone attacked him, someone was afraid that he would kill Hu Zhan, and the person who attacked had an extremely high cultivation. Ji Yufei let out a cold laugh, and directly punched towards the incoming expert, while his hand knife did not stop at all. Bang! It chopped the back of Hu Zhan's neck. Just as Ji Yufei's hand knife chopped Hu Zhan, his expression immediately changed greatly, and he secretly cursed in his heart. It was as if his palm had chopped onto an indestructible piece of fine iron. Not only did it not injure Hu Zhan, it even caused his palm to feel a burst of pain. Whoosh! A tiger claw with the white tiger's divine markings emitted a sharp claw light that was more than a foot long, and swept towards Ji Yufei's chest. In front of him was a tiger claw, and behind him was a powerful enemy. For a moment, Ji Yufei actually fell into a predicament of being attacked from both front and back. Retreat! Without any hesitation, he directly retreated, because the greatest threat to him was the terrifying tiger claw that seemed to be able to pierce through the void. Boom! With a loud sound, Ji Yufei's fist fiercely collided with the attacking person. Unexpectedly, Ji Yufei's fist seemed to have hit a huge mountain. Although it shook the expert, his own retreating momentum was forcibly stopped. Pang! The clothes on his chest and abdomen were instantly torn by the tiger claw. The sharp claw force was like a divine weapon, and it ruthlessly swept onto Ji Yufei's chest and abdomen. Without any suspense, amidst everyone's cries of surprise, Ji Yufei was directly swept away by the extremely ferocious claw force. Only then did he clearly see that the person who attacked him was the short and skinny hunchback youth who seemed to be carrying a turtle shell on his back. Hu Zhan, who had fallen into a frenzy, roared. His limbs pushed off the ground, and he turned into a white light, chasing after Ji Yufei, who was sent flying. How shuck preposterous! Ji Yufei only felt as if his internal organs had been dug out by Hu Zhan's claw. Although he wasn't cut into two by the extremely sharp claw force, his internal organs suffered a violent shock. A wave of hot blood surged up Ji Yufei's throat, but he forcefully swallowed it back down. No one had expected things to turn out like this. They all stared dumbfoundedly at the scene in front of them. At this moment, when Ji Yufei saw Hu Zhan fiercely pouncing towards him again, he couldn't help but be furious. I originally didn't want to take your life, but you're forcing me to kill you. When his life was threatened, Ji Yufei couldn't care so much anymore. He began to draw the essence of the divine weapon in his body to gather in his abdomen. Then, he suddenly stopped. He opened his mouth, and a resplendent purple sword light instantly shot out from his mouth, killing towards Hu Zhon. Sword Qi, flying sword. The three outstanding successors of the Guangqing immortal sect, who were watching from the side, couldn't help but be shocked when they saw Ji Yufei actually spit out sword light. How does he know the way of the sword? Ren Wuming couldn't help but frown. As for Guangqing's junior, Li Mengyaro, her delicate little mouth was wide open as she looked at Ji Yufei with a face full of shock. Hum. A sword hum resounded through the entire area. The purple sword light that shot out from Ji Yufei's mouth instantly increased by 10 zhong. It was as vigorous as a soaring dragon, emitting extremely terrifying sword qi fluctuations. The purple sword light cut through the void, instantly arriving in front of Hu Zhon, who was pouncing over. As long as the sword light descended and twisted, Hu Zhon would be directly killed on the spot. The essence of the divine weapon that Ji Yufei had refined into his body was not ordinary. This was Ji Yufei's final trump card, his trump card. However, at this moment, Ji Yufei's trump card was forced to be displayed in front of everyone by Hu Zhon. Just as Hu Zhon was about to die under Ji Yufei's sword light, a huge hand suddenly appeared in the sky. Then, it grabbed Hu Zhon, who had already been completely controlled by his bestial nature, and retreated. Ji Yufei sneered. Purple lightning flashed across the sky. The purple sword light actually made a turn in the air, directly killing towards the huge hand. Regardless of whether it was the practitioners of the younger generation of the southern wilderness, or Li Lingfeng and the other successors of the three great Daoist sects, they were all shocked by this action of Ji Yufei. The transformation of the primordial spirit, thousands of miles away, this was a huge primordial spirit hand cultivated by a great cultivator. It was a manifestation of the Dao connotation. Obviously, a great cultivator had made a move. Someone did not want Hu Zhon to die under Ji Yufei's sword light. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they would have stopped a long time ago. However, Ji Yufei was extremely daring. Not only did he not stop, but he also manipulated the sword light to kill the huge hand that was descending from the sky. It was really crazy. In front of a great cultivator, even a practitioner of the transcending mortality realm was like an ant. With a flip of the palm, they could destroy a large number of them, let alone a practitioner of the awakening self-realm. Ji Yufei's battle intent was like a rainbow. Under the perception of the qi, the dazzling sword light formed by the divine weapon's essence immediately went against the natural order to kill. It did not matter if it was a great cultivator or a small cultivator, it did not matter if it could be provoked or not provoked. Roar. In the huge hand, a crazy white tiger was roaring. It was not a real white tiger, but the image of a white tiger that was condensed by the white tiger's divine markings. However, no matter how hard Hu Zhon struggled, no matter how powerful he could not escape from the control of the huge hand. He was completely suppressed. Hey! Interesting, it's a broken weapon's soul. I'll take it. These words rang out from the distant sky. Almost at the same time, an energy storm swept out from the large hand and swept towards the purple sword light that was coming for him. The person seemed to have noticed the extraordinariness of the purple sword light. He actually wanted to collect the sword light with his great spiritual power. The energy storm that swept out from the huge hand wrapped the sword light in an instant. The light of the sword light immediately dimmed. At the same time, Ji Yufei's expression changed greatly on the ground. He could no longer maintain his composure. This was because the moment the power from the huge hand wrapped around the dazzling purple sword light, he actually could not sense the existence of the weapon's essence. Not only did the primordial spirit hand wrap around Hu Zhon, it even imprisoned the divine armament's essence energy that Ji Yufei released. Furthermore, it rose into the sky, and in an instant, it soared into the sky. How dare you? Ji Yufei could not help but panic. The weapon's essence was extremely important to him. It was his life-saving talisman. It had already allowed him to escape death several times. After losing the weapon's essence, Ji Yufei had lost his greatest reliance. Just as Ji Yufei thought that he was about to lose the weapon's essence, a huge hand made of flames suddenly appeared. With a mighty roaring flame, it directly intercepted the huge hand that was wrapped around Hu Zhon and the weapon's essence. Taoist Chaoyang, what do you want? An angry roar came from afar. The rolling sound waves caused the sky and earth to tremble. A great pressure immediately spread out, causing everyone's expression to change. Is it Grandmaster Chaoyang of Shaoyang Peak? Li Lingfeng, Ziyu, and the other disciples of Taishen sect couldn't help but feel delighted. Leave the thing of Taishen sect. A calm voice drifted from another direction of Dragon Emperor City. Closely after that, the fiery hand directly intercepted the immortal weapon's essence which was bound by that person's power. Humph. The person who had secretly saved Hu Zhon seemed unwilling, but he also didn't want to fight with Taoist Chaoyang. The huge hand wrapped Hu Zhon and quickly left. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from everyone's sight. After the huge hand made of the mysterious person's primordial spirit retreated, the hand made of flames in the night sky also dimmed and finally disappeared into the void. The two great cultivators didn't show up. Even though they were thousands of miles away from each other, they had already fought for a short while in the sky above Dragon Emperor City. Although everyone was shocked by the great cultivator's magical ability, they couldn't help but yearn for it. If they had such a cultivation base, Kai. A bright purple sword light shot down from the sky, tearing the void and making a sound like tearing silk. The next moment, this sword light entered Ji Yufei's body. The weapon's essence that had been smelted into his body reintegrated into Ji Yufei's body and traveled through his qi and blood. After a period of refinement, this weapon's essence became more and more pure. In tonight's battle, Ji Yufei not only defeated the most outstanding young powerhouse in the southern wilderness, Hu Zhon of the White Tiger clan, but he also learned something about the weapon's essence in his body. The weapon's soul is broken. Could it be that the sword hilt passed down by the Grandmaster of Green Spirit Peak has an unimaginable origin? It's actually a peerless weapon that has given birth to a weapon's soul? Ji Yufei couldn't help but be shocked. The mysterious yin-yang jade pendant and the sword hilt passed down by his master all had a great origin and unknown secrets. This made Ji Yufei faintly feel uneasy. Just a strand of essence energy from a divine weapon was enough to attract the attention of a grand cultivator. If others knew that he had the yin-yang fish jade pendant that could increase his cultivation speed by 10 times, those grand cultivators would definitely make a move on him. I'd better keep a low profile in the future, Ji Yufei thought. He didn't want to attract others' attention. At this moment, the people who were spying on the southern desolate Duke side courtyard had already disappeared. This side courtyard could be said to have been destroyed by Ji Yufei and the others. However, this kind of side courtyard was nothing to the southern desolate Duke. It didn't matter if it was destroyed. The most important thing was that the southern desolate Duke's son, Yang Zun, had successfully provoked the confrontation between the young cultivators of the southern desolate Duke and the outstanding successors of the three great Daoist sects. The news that Ji Yufei had defeated Hu Zhon had already quietly spread among the major forces of Dragon Emperor City. Of course, the outstanding cultivators of the southern desolate Duke's younger generation were not convinced. Some truly outstanding cultivators would come knocking on his door sooner or later. However, this wasn't something that Ji Yufei could predict. Moreover, he didn't feel like caring about these trivial matters. After all, strength was everything. Whoever's fist was harder would be the boss. The southern desolate Duke's cultivators left under the lead of Gui Teng and the young man in purple. Li Lingfeng and the others, on the other hand, walked towards Ji Yufei in high spirits. However, Ji Yufei didn't wait for Li Lingfeng and the others to come closer. He took a step forward, and with a swoosh, he left an afterimage on the spot and quickly went far away. Everyone couldn't help but stop and look at each other. This night was destined to be an unusual night. The news that Ji Yufei had defeated Hu Zhon of the White Tiger clan must have already been known by many people in the city. Perhaps the cultivation world of the southern desolate Duke would boil because of this. Ji Yufei returned to Canvas Luna Restaurant and entered his residence. After entering, his face immediately became flushed and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. He hurriedly sat cross-legged in the room and slowly operated his mysterious technique, drawing the energy within his body to heal his wounded body. Hu Zhan's Tiger Raw Sonic Kill divine ability caused a great impact on Ji Yufei. And in order to thoroughly defeat Hu Zhan, Ji Yufei had barely managed to execute the 5-elemental unification seal. Although the seal was powerful, in the end, that power wasn't something that he could control right now. Although the 5-elemental unification seal could only be maintained for a short moment, Ji Yufei was still unavoidably injured by his own power. It could be said that although Ji Yufei looked unparalleled tonight and completely suppressed Hu Zhan, in reality, he also suffered internal injuries. Especially that crazy claw of Hu Zhan's at the end, which directly left 5 bloody marks on his chest and abdomen. The Southern Desolate Duke was a place of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. It indeed couldn't be underestimated. Especially the Southern Desolate Duke who had proud talent. As time passed, Ji Yufei's entire body began to emit waves of precious splendor. His bones made cracking sounds, his muscles trembled, and his flesh squirmed. The power contained within his body was guided out. The powerful life essence was repairing Ji Yufei's injured body. The 5 bloody marks on his chest and abdomen were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The wounds were shrinking until they formed scabs, and then the scabs fell off. There weren't any scars left on the wounds. After breaking into the 9 heavenly layers of awakening, Ji Yufei's body's recovery ability also became extremely shocking. His muscles, bones, and flesh were incomparably strong, and contained a huge amount of life essence. His powerful body was difficult to be injured. It was strong enough to shake ordinary magic treasures. Even if he was injured, he could quickly recover. If his bones were broken, new bones could quickly grow out. If his flesh and blood were injured, the injured flesh and blood could also heal. It could be said that Ji Yufei's life force was much stronger than ordinary cultivators. The huge amount of life essence caused Ji Yufei to be like the 9 lives divine cat. His life force was extremely tenacious. For ordinary cultivators, fatal injuries could no longer pose a fatal threat to Ji Yufei. This was the advantage of having a strong physical body. Cultivators cultivated themselves. They cultivated their muscles, bones, and flesh. Others cultivated Dao techniques and magic treasures, but the body of a cultivator was the strongest magic treasure. The martial way was not inferior to cultivation, nor was it inferior to magical powers. It was just that it was difficult to succeed in cultivating. In comparison, magical powers and Dao techniques were easy to learn. Most people in the world knew that it was easy to do. Few people were willing to know that it was easy to do. When the majority of people knew that it was easy to do, the martial way would completely decline. This might be the trend of the times. The decline of the martial way was not unreasonable. However, successful cultivators were terrifying existences in the cultivation world in each era. Their bodies were unparalleled, and their fighting skills could break all kinds of Dao techniques and magical powers. Just like the indestructible body that Ji Yufei had seen in the cavern at the bottom of the icy azure pool, a cultivator who had cultivated to a certain level would be able to live forever even after countless years had passed. Ji Yufei was cultivating in his room. What he didn't know was that many people had already fixed their eyes on the canvas lunar building. To be exact, they had fixed their eyes on him. However, no one dared to enter the courtyard where Ji Yufei stayed, because it was the place where the disciples of Taishen sect stayed in Dragon Emperor City. Some people already knew that a powerhouse of Taishen sect had come to Dragon Emperor City. Nobody wanted to provoke such a powerhouse. The fights between the younger generation were just small fights. Even if a disciple of a clan was killed in a fight, it could only be attributed to his lack of skills. However, the older generation powerhouses couldn't casually deal with the younger generation. This was also the reason why the mysterious person only saved Hu Zhan instead of killing Ji Yufei. Chapter 145. Just as Hu Zhan was about to die under Ji Yufei's sword light, a huge hand suddenly appeared in the sky. Then, it grabbed Hu Zhan, who had been completely controlled by his bestial nature, and retreated. Ji Yufei sneered. Purple lightning flashed across the sky. The purple sword light actually made a turn in the air and directly attacked the huge hand. Whether it was the practitioners of the younger generation of the southern wilderness, or Li Lingfeng and the other successors of the three major Daoist sects, they were all shocked by Ji Yufei's action. The transformation of the primordial spirit, thousands of miles away. This was the huge hand of the primordial spirit cultivated by a great cultivator. It was the manifestation of Taoist connotation. Obviously, a great cultivator had made a move. Someone did not want Hu Zhon to die under Ji Yufei's sword light. If it was an ordinary cultivator, he would have stopped a long time ago. However, Ji Yufei was extremely daring. Not only did he not stop, but he also manipulated the sword light and attacked the huge hand that was descending from the sky. It was really crazy. In front of a great cultivator, even a practitioner of the transcending mortality stage was like an ant. With a flip of the palm, he could destroy a large number of them, let alone a practitioner of the awakening self stage. Ji Yufei's battle intent was like a rainbow. Under the detection of the qi, the brilliant sword light formed by the essence of the heavenly weapon immediately went against the natural order and attacked. It did not matter whether it was a great cultivator or a small cultivator, whether it could be provoked or not. Roar. In the huge hand, a crazy white tiger was roaring. It was not a real white tiger, but the image of a white tiger formed by the divine marks of the white tiger. However, no matter how hard Hu Zhon struggled, no matter how he tried, and no matter how powerful his magical power was, he could not escape from the control of the huge hand. He was completely suppressed. Hey! Interesting. It's a broken weapon soul. I'll take it. These words rang out from the distant sky. Almost at the same time, a mighty energy storm swept out from the large hand, sweeping towards the purple sword light that was coming for him. That person seemed to have noticed the extraordinariness of the purple sword light, and actually wanted to use a great amount of magic power to collect the sword light. The energy storm that swept out from the big hand wrapped around the sword light in an instant. The light of the sword light immediately dimmed. At the same time, the expression of Ji Yufei, who was on the ground, changed greatly. He could no longer maintain his composure. This was because he could no longer sense the presence of the divine weapon's essence when the vast power from the hand enveloped the resplendent purple sword light. Not only did the primordial spirit hand wrap around Hu Zhon, it even imprisoned the divine armament's essence energy that Ji Yufei released. Furthermore, it rose into the sky, and in an instant, it soared into the sky. Preposterous. Ji Yufei couldn't help panicking. That essence energy was incomparably important to him. It was his life-saving talisman, and it had already allowed him to escape death several times. After losing the divine armament's essence energy, Ji Yufei had lost his greatest reliance. Just when Ji Yufei thought that he was going to lose the divine armament's essence energy, a huge flaming hand suddenly appeared. With a vast amount of raging flames, it directly intercepted the huge hand that was wrapped around Hu Zhon and the divine armament's essence energy. Daoist Chaoyang, what do you want? An angry roar came from afar. The rolling sound waves caused the sky and earth to tremble. A great pressure immediately spread out, causing everyone to change their expressions. Is it Grandmaster Chaoyang of Shaoyang Peak? Li Lingfeng, Ziyu, and the other disciples of the Taishen sect couldn't help but feel delighted. Leave behind the things of the Taishen sect. A calm voice drifted from another direction of Dragon Emperor City. Closely after that, the fiery hand directly intercepted the immortal weapon's essence which was bound by that person's power. Humph. The person who had secretly saved Hu Zhon seemed unwilling, but he also didn't want to fight with Daoist Chaoyang. The huge hand wrapped Hu Zhon and quickly left, disappearing from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. After the huge hand transformed by the mysterious person's primordial spirit retreated, the flaming hand in the night sky also dimmed and finally disappeared in the void. The two great cultivators didn't show up. Even though they were thousands of miles away from each other, they had already fought for a short time in the sky above Dragon Emperor City. Although everyone was shocked by the great cultivator's magical abilities, they couldn't help but yearn for it. If they had such a cultivation base, Kai. A bright purple sword light shot down from the sky, tearing the void and making a sound like tearing silk. The next moment, this sword light immediately entered Ji Yufei's body. The divine armament's essence energy that had been smelted into his body reintegrated into Ji Yufei's body and traveled through his qi and blood. After a period of refinement, this divine armament's essence energy became purer and purer. In tonight's battle, Ji Yufei not only defeated the most outstanding young powerhouse in the southern wilderness, Hu Zhon of the White Tiger clan, but he also learned something about the divine armament's essence energy in his body. The weapon's soul is broken. Could it be that the sword hilt passed down by the ancestor of my green spirit peak has an unimaginable origin? It's actually a peerless divine armament that has given birth to a divine armament soul? Ji Yufei couldn't help being shocked. The mysterious yin-yang fish jade pendant and the sword hilt passed down by his master all had great origins and unknown secrets. This made Ji Yufei faintly uneasy. Just a strand of essence energy from a divine weapon was enough to attract the attention of a grand cultivator. If others knew that he had the yin-yang fish jade pendant that could increase his cultivation speed by 10 times, those grand cultivators would definitely make a move on him. I'd better keep a low profile in the future, Ji Yufei thought. He didn't want to attract other people's attention. At this moment, the figures spying on the southern desolate Duke side courtyard had already disappeared. This side courtyard could be said to have been destroyed by Ji Yufei and the others. However, this kind of side courtyard was nothing to the southern desolate Duke. It didn't matter if it was destroyed. The most important thing was that the Duke's son, Yang Zun, had successfully provoked the confrontation between the young cultivators of the southern desolate Duke and the outstanding descendants of the three great Daoist sects. The news of Ji Yufei defeating Hu Zhon had already quietly spread among the major forces of Dragon Emperor City. Of course, the outstanding cultivators of the southern desolate Duke's younger generation were not convinced. Sooner or later, some truly outstanding cultivators would come to find them. However, this wasn't something that Ji Yufei could predict. Furthermore, he didn't want to care about these trivial matters. After all, strength was everything. Whoever's fist was harder, that person was the boss. Under the lead of Gui Teng and the purple-haired young man, the southern desolate Duke's cultivators left in a very bad mood. Li Lingfeng and the others, on the other hand, walked towards Ji Yufei in high spirits. However, before Li Lingfeng and the others could approach him, Ji Yufei took a step forward. With a whoosh, he left an afterimage on the spot and quickly went far away. Everyone couldn't help but stop and look at each other. This night was destined to be an unusual night. The news of Ji Yufei defeating Hu Zhon of the White Tiger clan must have already been known by many people in the city. Perhaps the cultivation world of the southern desolate Duke would be seething because of this. Ji Yufei returned to the Canvas Lunar restaurant and entered his residence. After entering, his face immediately flushed red and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. He hurriedly sat cross-legged in the room and slowly operated his mysterious technique, drawing out the power in his body to heal his injured body. Hu Zhon's Tiger Raw Sonic Kill divine ability caused Ji Yufei to suffer a great impact. And in order to thoroughly defeat Hu Zhon, Ji Yufei forcefully used the 5 elements fused seal art. Although the seal art's power was strong, in the end, that power wasn't something that he could control at the moment. However, that power was not something he could control at the moment. Although the 5 elemental seal could only be maintained for a short moment, Ji Yufei still could not avoid being injured by his own power. It could be said that Ji Yufei looked unparalleled tonight and completely suppressed Hu Zhon, but in reality, he also suffered internal injuries. Especially that crazy claw of Hu Zhon's at the end, which directly left 5 bloody marks on his chest and abdomen. The southern desolate Duke's crouching tigers and hidden dragons indeed couldn't be underestimated. Especially the southern desolate barbarians who had proud talent. As time passed, Ji Yufei's entire body began to emit waves of precious splendor. His bones made catcha sounds, his tendons and bones trembled, his flesh wriggled, and the power contained within his body was guided out. The powerful life essence was healing Ji Yufei's injured body. The 5 bloody marks on his chest and abdomen were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The wounds were shrinking until they formed scabs, and then the scabs fell off, leaving no scars behind. After breaking into the 9 heavenly layers awakening, Ji Yufei's body's recovery ability also became extremely shocking. His tendons, bones, and flesh were incomparably strong, and they also contained a huge amount of life essence. A strong body was hard to be injured, and it was enough to shake ordinary magic treasures. Even if he was injured, he could recover very quickly. If his bones were broken, new bones could quickly grow out from the broken parts. If his flesh was injured, the injured parts could also heal. It could be said that Jiu Fei's life force was much stronger than an ordinary cultivator's. The huge amount of life essence made Jiu Fei like the divine cat of 9 lives. His life force was extremely tenacious. For an ordinary cultivator, a wound that was enough to be fatal could no longer pose a fatal threat to Jiu Fei. This was the advantage of having a powerful mortal body. A martial artist cultivated their body, their tendons, bones, and flesh. Others cultivated Dao techniques and magic treasures, but a martial artist's body was the most powerful magic treasure. Martial arts were not inferior to true cultivation, nor were they inferior to supernatural powers. It was just that it was difficult to cultivate. In contrast, magical powers and Dao techniques were easy to learn. Most people in the world knew that it was easy to do, but not many people were willing to know that it was easy to do. When the majority of people knew that it was easy to do, then the martial arts path would completely decline. Perhaps this was the trend of the times. The decline of the martial arts path was not without reason. However, martial artists who cultivated successfully, in every era, were terrifying existences in the world of cultivation. Their mortal bodies were incomparably powerful, and their martial arts and battle skills could break through thousands of Dao techniques and thousands of supernatural powers. Just like the immortal body that Jiu Fei saw in the cave at the bottom of the icy green pool, martial artists who cultivated successfully, even if they died countless years ago, their mortal bodies would still be immortal and exist forever in the world. As Jiu Fei was cultivating in his room, he didn't know that many people had already fixed their eyes on the canvas lunar building. To be exact, they had fixed their eyes on him. However, nobody dared to enter the courtyard where Jiu Fei stayed, because it was the place where the disciples of Taishen sect stayed in Dragon Emperor City. Some people already knew that a master of Taishen sect had come to Dragon Emperor City. Nobody wanted to provoke such a master. The fights between the younger generation were just small fights. Even if some disciples were killed in the fights, it could only be attributed to their lack of skills. However, the masters of the older generation couldn't casually deal with the younger generation. This was also the reason why the mysterious man only saved Hu Zhon instead of killing Jiu Fei. Chapter 146. It was a young man with a very cold and arrogant expression. He stood quietly in front of the pavilion where Jiu Fei was, and his slender body exuded an extremely strong sense of oppression. His appearance could not be considered very handsome, but he had a unique temperament that was unforgettable after a glance. He was like a proud king. Even if he stood casually in a large group of people, he would still be able to show his outstanding side. It was not far from daybreak, and the surroundings were completely silent. Only the occasional rustling of trees could be heard. Fighting is not allowed in the canvassing moon pavilion. Don't you know the rules here? Jiu Fei had a very strange feeling when the old man glanced at him with his lifeless eyes. That pair of lifeless eyes seemed to be able to see into the depths of his heart, making him shudder with fear. This old man was definitely not simple. These are your rules, not mine, Azure Dragon said. The meaning behind his words was very clear. I don't necessarily have to abide by your rules. However, this is the canvassing moon pavilion, not the territory of your Azure Dragon clan, the old man said indifferently, revealing Azure Dragon's background. The Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise were the 4 great sacred clans of the southern wilderness that had been passed down since ancient times. It was said that their ancestors were the 4 great sacred beasts of ancient times. This Azure Dragon was the number 1 person among the younger generation of the Azure Dragon clan. Azure Dragon was not so much a name, but rather a title that only the number 1 person among the younger generation of the clan could have. At this moment, the people in the nearby courtyards had also noticed the abnormality here. They all came out of their pavilions and cast their gazes over. Azure Dragon took a deep look at the old man, and then said to Jiu Fei, I will come to find you again. Then, Azure Dragon turned around and left. Azure Dragon Clan. Ji Fei looked at Azure Dragon's departing figure and narrowed his eyes. Rays of light shot out from his eyes. This Azure Dragon was a good opponent. Although Ji Fei also wanted to fight with an expert like Azure Dragon, it had to be after the trip to the Ruin Sky Realm. He wanted to enter the Ruin Heaven Realm in peak condition. The Ruin Heaven Realm was a paradise, but it was also a place of great danger. Ji Fei did not want to die in the Ruin Heaven Realm. Ji Fei turned around, walked into the room, closed the door, and then sat cross-legged on the bed. He did not feel the slightest bit sleepy. After circulating his energy to heal his injuries, the injuries he suffered during the battle with Hu Zhon were no longer serious. At this time, he suddenly remembered the Xiaoqing snake in the magic treasure pouch. He wondered if the little guy had already refined the beast crystal in its stomach. Opening the artifact pouch, Zhongxian took a look inside. He was shocked to find that the beast crystals were nowhere to be seen. Even the Blackwater mystical serpent's Niden was gone. The Xiaoqing snake seemed to have expanded a little. It was already a foot long, and the 2 bumps on its head seemed to have become more obvious. The Xiaoqing snake was lazily coiled in the artifact pouch, and there was a round bulge on its abdomen. This. Ji Fei was extremely shocked. The Xiaoqing snake had really shocked him. It had even swallowed the Blackwater mystical serpent's Niden. This little thing can really eat. Ji Fei was speechless. The Blackwater mystical serpent's Niden was different from those beast crystals. It contained a huge amount of energy that belonged to the Blackwater mystical serpent. It seemed that it would not be easy to refine the Niden. The Xiaoqing snake was coiled in the artifact pouch, and its body was covered in a layer of cyan light that kept flowing. Ji Fei keenly noticed that the Xiaoqing snake seemed to have entered a strange state. It seemed to have entered a state of half-hibernation. As Ji Fei didn't want to disturb the Xiaoqing snake, he fastened the opening of the artifact pouch and tied it to his waist. After that, he closed his eyes and started to meditate to nourish his true qi. When the dawn was about to break, 3 people arrived at a hidden valley 50 miles away from Dragon Emperor City. The first one was an old daoist in a robe embroidered with 9 golden crows. The 9 golden crows on the old daoist's robe were so vivid that they looked like 9 bright suns, giving out heat. The other 2 people were Ding Yangzi of Shangqing sect and Liu Ruhai of Guangqing Immortal sect. Chapter 147. The huge altar was 30 feet high and 50 feet wide. It was built entirely from a huge bluestone. Apart from the countless runes carved in the center of the altar, it seemed that every bluestone that made up the altar had runes flashing on it, and a brilliance flowing on each and every bluestone. The 4 altars were emitting a pure and holy aura. Every single bluestone seemed to contain an inexplicable and obscure power, which seemed to be brewing. It was the righteous qi of the universe. The large formation on the sacrificial altar constantly converged the surrounding spiritual qi of the universe, making the sacrificial altar more extraordinary. There was a white jade staircase in front of the sacrificial altar. At this moment, Liu Ruhai of Guangqing Immortal sect and Ding Yangzi of Shangqing sect were accompanying an old daoist in a golden crow robe and a purple gold star crown up the stairs. The old daoist gave out a transcendent qi like an old immortal descending from the heavens. His movements didn't carry any mortal qi at all. This old daoist was Daoist Chaoyang, the founder of Shaoyang Peak of Taishen sect. When Daoist Chaoyang fought Demon Monarch of 6 realms in Yunmeng Mountain, nobody knew the final outcome of the battle. However, since Daoist Chaoyang fought Demon Monarch of 6 realms in Dragon Emperor City last night and appeared here with Liu Ruhai and Ding Yangzi, it indicated that he wasn't severely wounded in the battle. After stepping onto the sacrificial altar, Daoist Chaoyang looked around and nodded satisfactorily. Then, he waved his sleeves and told Ding Yangzi, who was standing respectfully on his side, "Let's start." "Yes, sir." Ding Yangzi hurriedly took a step forward and slapped the magic treasure pouch on his waist. Whoosh, whoosh. Dozens of small purple flags flew out of the 100 treasures pouch one after another. Each flag was less than 30 centimeters long and less than 4 fingers wide. They were covered with dense runes as if they were covered with a layer of flowing purple light. Meanwhile, These small flags emitted a vast magical power wave. The purple flags floated above the altar. There were a total of 49 flags, and they were 7 by 7. As Cauldron Yangzi made a series of hand seals, the 49 small flags began to emit a hazy purple radiance. The talismans on the flags seemed to have come to life and were about to rush out from the surface of the flags. The 49 small flags formed a mysterious formation in the air. The purple light emitted by the 49 small flags merged into one, covering the sky above the altar. For a time, the sun and moon in this hidden valley lost their light, and the world lost its color. However, all the strange fluctuations were blocked by an unfathomable power that enveloped the entire valley. Not a single trace of it could be transmitted out. Clearly, Daoist Chao Yang and the others were prepared and sealed off the entire valley to prevent anyone from sensing anything unusual here. After all, there were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the southern wilderness. If one didn't make preparations beforehand, then the unusual fluctuation of the essence of heaven and earth would absolutely be unable to escape the senses of those great cultivators. Liu Ruhai, a sword expert of the broad accomplishment immortal sect, couldn't help but be moved by Ding Yangzi's marvelous formation. Only Daoist Chaoyang remained unperturbed. "Go!" Cauldron Yangzi shouted and formed a seal with his hand. Then, he pressed it against the formation flags above him. A stream of pure mana surged out of the seal and entered the purple mist. At the same time, the 49 array flags that were shrouded in purple gas, after absorbing this spiritual power, seemed to be completely aroused the power of the array flags. In an instant, each array flag grew to 100 feet in size, then turned into 49 rays of purple light that blasted in all directions, submerging into the mountains around the valley. In the blink of an eye, the purple mist disappeared from the sky, and there was no longer any fluctuation of mana. The world was clear and bright. The rising sun in the east shone its rays onto the sacrificial altar. This is the Shongqing sect's 8 gates reversal, shape-shifting illusions formation. With this formation sealing off the valley, I believe that even the big shots of the southern wilderness will not be able to detect anything unusual in the valley, Cauldron Yangzi confidently said to Daoist Chao Yang. "Yes. Very good." Daoist Chao Yang nodded as he walked straight to the center of the large formation above the sacrificial altar and sat down with crossed legs. "You can go now. As long as I'm here, nobody could destroy the sacrificial altar unless a semideity-level unparalleled figure takes action," Daoist Chao Yang said calmly. "Yes, sir." Liu Ruhai and Cauldron Yangzi bowed towards Daoist Chao Yang before turning around and leaving. "Wait." Daoist Chao Yang suddenly stopped them. "In a few days, Daoist Li Shong should send a message to us. When you go back, you should restrain your disciples. Don't make any trouble in Dragon Emperor City anymore. If those old B***stards of the southern wilderness come out, it would be very troublesome." After hearing Daoist Chao Yang's words, Liu Ruhai and Cauldron Yangzi exchanged a glance with each other before agreeing in unison. After that, they moved back a few steps before turning around and leaving. The two of them walked out of the valley and looked back. They saw that the valley was lush and green. Waterfalls and fountains dotted the valley. It was a scene of prosperity. What altar, what formation, and what human figure could there be? Daoist brother Cauldron Yangzi, your Shongqing sect's knowledge of formations is really marvelous. When Liu Ruhai saw this, he could not help but sigh in admiration. This formation that reversed the 8 gates and shifting shadows actually concealed everything in the valley. No one could tell that what they saw was an illusion. "I'm flattered," Cauldron Yangzi said with a smile. After talking for a short while, the two people left the valley for Dragon Emperor City together. Ji Yufei was taking a rest with his eyes closed in his room on the top floor of the pavilion while an extremely obscure vital chi wave was surging over his body, which was the power of the source of life. On the path of cultivation, all the power originated from the body. The body was a huge treasure. The more profound one's cultivation base was, the greater the power would be. After last night's battle, Zhong Tai's 9th heavenly layer's power had been much purer. He could control the new power more skillfully. However, Ji Yufei felt that the new energy that he had guided out from breaking through the bottleneck of his cultivation was not completely compatible with his body. There was a process for the new energy to be compatible with his body, and this was something that no one could avoid. Ji Yufei's body was undergoing subtle changes to adapt to the new power. The power in his flesh, blood, tendons, and bones was gradually increasing. Ji Yufei's body was advancing towards a treasure body. When the power in his flesh reached the bottleneck, it would be the day he would break through to the transcending mortality realm. It could be said that Ji Yufei's power was not in his dantian, but in his body. Although there was a ball of natal essence in his dantian, it was not the center of his power. The function of natal essence was to transform the vitality of the world and communicate with the internal and external heavens and earth. The internal heavens and earth were the heavens and earth inside one's body, while the external heavens and earth were the natural heavens and earth outside. The path of cultivation focused on cultivating one's body, but comprehending the heavens and earth was also indispensable. Powerful power required a corresponding state of mind to control and manipulate. Ji Yufei was in a semi-conscious state. His whole body was relaxed, and his thoughts wandered above the 9 heavens, wandering between the heavens and earth. He seemed to have become a bystander, indifferently feeling the pulse of the new power in his body. His flesh, blood, tendons, and bones trembled slightly, absorbing the power bit by bit. No sadness, no joy, this was Ji Yufei's current state of mind. Watching the flowers bloom and wither in front of the courtyard, there was no intention to stay or go, watching the clouds in the sky, unmoved by favor or disgrace. After an unknown period of time, there was a sudden sound of light footsteps outside the pavilion. Then, very quickly, that person walked into the pavilion and came to Ji Yufei's door. Ji Yufei naturally woke up from that mysterious state. "Distinguished guest, this servant has prepared lunch for you. May I ask if you would like to eat now?" Then, a gentle voice came from outside the door. "Come in." He stood up from the bed, turned around the screen in the bedroom, and walked to the front hall. At this time, the girl outside the door also pushed open the door and walked in. In her hands, there was a purple tray. On the tray, there were a few dishes and a pot of wine. Ji Yufei glanced at this girl. He saw that this girl was not old, and should be called a young girl. The young girl was wearing an emerald green dress. Her appearance was charming, and her skin was delicate and white. She was a beautiful girl. Of course, this young girl's appearance, compared to Zhao Ziru and Ling Luoyang, was much inferior. At least, this young girl in front of him did not have Zhao Ziru's otherworldly temperament, nor did she have Ling Luoyan's noble aura. Ji Yufei sensed the movements in the surroundings. He discovered that on the other pavilions in the courtyard, there were also figures of emerald green girls holding trays. The young girl placed the trays on the table, and then carefully placed the wine and dishes in front of Ji Yufei. Ji Yufei felt that the trays used to hold the wine and dishes seemed to be made of a whole piece of purple jade. He couldn't help but be a little surprised. It seemed that this canvas lunar pavilion was not simple. Purple jade, even in the world of cultivation, was a rare material. The jade talismans that cultivators wore on their bodies were refined from purple jade. But the people of the canvas lunar pavilion actually used purple jade trays to hold the wine and dishes. This made Ji Yufei feel that it was a waste of a heavenly treasure. "Customer, please enjoy." The young girl bowed to Ji Yufei, and then left. "Junior brother Ji Yu, are you going out?" At the entrance of the canvas lunar pavilion, Ji Yufei was stopped by a person. There seemed to be only 2 people in the sect who could call him junior brother. The one who called out to Ji Yufei was one of them. "Oh, it's you. What's the matter?" Ji Yufei asked calmly after taking a look at that person. It was a young man in white who didn't look outstanding. This young man in white was the eldest senior brother of the younger generation of the Taishan sect, Li Lingfeng. "Hihi, I also want to go out for a walk. Let's go together." Li Lingfeng was very friendly. Although he didn't have a deep relationship with Ji Yufei, he had always been very warm to Ji Yufei. Those who didn't know might think that they had been close friends for many years. Ji Yufei took a deep look at Li Lingfeng. After quite a while, he nodded. The streets of Dragon Emperor City were very spacious and prosperous. There were many shops and restaurants on both sides of the street, and people came and went. Moreover, from time to time, One could see people from other regions whose skin color and hair were different from those of the Central Plains. As Ji Yufei and Li Lingfeng walked on the street, Ji Yufei found that some of the shops on the street were actually selling items from the world of cultivation. There were magic treasures of cultivators, Taoist talismans, jade talismans, various kinds of immortal weapons that had been refined by Taoist methods. There were also old ginseng, glossy ganoderma, black, and other spiritual medicines. Ji Yufei was not interested in these things at all. He was not a cultivator, so he didn't need magic treasures and Taoist talismans. As for those so-called immortal weapons that had been refined by Taoist methods, he didn't care about them at all. As for ginseng and glossy ganoderma, he didn't care about them at all. The oldest ginseng was only over 300 years old, which couldn't arouse Ji Yufei's interest at all. Ji Yufei and Li Lingfeng chatted as they walked through the crowd. All of a sudden, a man in cyan came from the front and stopped them. "Excuse me, is that Ji Yufei? My master wants to see you." The man in cyan bowed towards the two people, however, he directly called Ji Yufei's name in an arrogant manner. After exchanging a glance with each other, Ji Yufei and Li Lingfeng both felt a bit confused. As they were just passers-by in Dragon Emperor City, they didn't know anyone. Who would know about their existence? "I'm Ji Yufei. Who's your master?" Ji Yufei couldn't be bothered to say anything to this fellow. His eyes shot out two rays of light that were as sharp as blades, shining on the man's face. At the same time, a great pressure was emitted from Ji Yufei's body. The azure-clothed man felt his eyes light up as Ji Yufei's eyes suddenly became dazzling and resplendent like the stars in the sky, and he couldn't help but be shocked. He hurriedly lowered his head and didn't dare look directly at Ji Yufei. At the same time, the man in cyan sensed the mountain-like pressure from Ji Yufei, which filled him with fear. He felt as small as an ant in front of Ji Yufei. There were some dog slaves who, when treated nicely, would become extremely arrogant and look down on everyone. Their tails were practically about to reach the heavens. However, if they were to be slapped twice, causing them to lose their bearings, they would obediently scram to the side. This man in cyan was the one who deserved to be slapped. However, the master behind this guy should have a great background, otherwise, this guy would not dare assume the majesty of a tiger. Please follow me. My master is in Drunken Immortal's residence in front of us." Under the fierce pressure of Ji Yufei, the man in cyan's voice quivered. At the same time, he hurriedly lowered his head and led the way. "Let's take a look." Ji Yufei didn't think too much about it. No matter what, he couldn't guess who the master of this man in cyan was. If he wanted to know who that master was, the most direct way was to meet that master. At the sight of this, Li Lingfeng couldn't help but frown as he recalled Dan Chunzi's words in the morning. Dan Chunzi told him to restrain his fellow disciples, however, he couldn't restrain Ji Yufei. Chapter 148. Drunken Immortal Residence was a boîte, which was a bit famous in Dragon Emperor City because of the two words Drunken Immortal. It was said that even immortals and deities would be drunk after drinking the fine liquor of Drunken Immortal Residence. In Drunken Immortal Residence, even the lowest liquor was century-old. If you could afford it, you could even taste the top-level Shenshen liquor which was over 500 years old, which could increase your cultivation base, or the vermilion fruit liquor which was brewed with 1,000 years old vermilion fruit. The green-robed man brought Ji Yufei to the entrance of the Drunken Immortal Residence. Ji Yufei seemed to have sensed something and immediately stopped. His expression was a little ugly. He raised his head and looked at the restaurant located in the middle of the bustling city. The three golden words Drunken Immortal Tavern were written on the banner, which shone with a dazzling golden light under the afternoon sun. It was somewhat dazzling. "I was wondering who it was." "It's them," Ji Yufei murmured. He sensed a few familiar auras. He smiled and strode into the Drunken Immortal Residence without any scruples. At this time, the azure-clothed man had long since abandoned Ji Yufei and ran off to God knows where, while Li Lingfeng had already arrived at the entrance of the Drunken Immortal Residence. These people. Li Lingfeng's expression immediately turned grave when he sensed the auras coming from inside. "Please don't let anything happen to them." Li Lingfeng hurriedly entered Drunken Immortal Residence. There wasn't a single soul in sight. That's right, This drunken immortal abode that was situated in the middle of the bustling city had a huge lobby on the first floor, yet not a single customer could be seen. Only a fair-skinned middle-aged man who looked like a manager was standing behind the counter in a flurried way as he looked at the staircase leading to the second floor from time to time. Today, some big figures had booked the entire drunken immortal residence. As the manager of this boîte, he should be happy to meet such extravagant guests. However, the manager of drunken immortal residence didn't feel happy at all. He even preferred that these people didn't come here and didn't do business with these extravagant guests. Because these people had prominent backgrounds and identities in South Wilderness. If these extravagant guests were unhappy, they could easily raise drunken immortal residence to the ground. In the eyes of these people, the drunken immortal residence was merely an ordinary restaurant. Li Lingfeng walked into the lobby on the first floor. His gaze, which was as sharp as a blade and as sharp as an arrow, swept across the lobby before he immediately walked toward the staircase leading to the second floor. When Li Lingfeng reached the second floor, she happened to see Ji Yufei walking into a private room. Online ETN. Those familiar auras came from that private room. After Ji Yufei went in, Li Lingfeng clearly felt that the auras of those people began to increase rapidly. The private room was filled with a threatening aura, as if a barrel of gunpowder had been ignited. Swoosh! Li Lingfeng disappeared from where he was, crossing a distance of 7 or 8 feet in an instant, appearing outside the door of the private room. Then, he pushed the door open and entered. When he saw the people in the private room, Li Lingfeng couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He groaned inwardly. So it really was them. Hee. I didn't think that the eldest senior of the Taishen sect would also come. Please, sit. A tall and sturdy young man in white said with a laugh. Hu Zhon. Seeing this young man in white, Li Lingfeng's pupils couldn't help but contract. He couldn't help but reveal a hint of battle intent. Li Lingfeng had been defeated very miserably in the battle with Hu Zhon last night. The scene at that time had long been deeply imprinted in his heart. He would probably remember it clearly for the rest of his life. If Dan Chunzi hadn't given Li Lingfeng, Ren Wuming, and Lin Xian, the three of them had used the effects of the origin cultivating pills to recover from their injuries overnight, they would probably still be recuperating. Origin cultivating pills could strengthen one's foundation. For Li Lingfeng and the others whose yuan qi had been damaged, it was no different from a miracle pill. After spitting out a few mouthfuls of congested blood, their injuries would be completely healed. Li Lingfeng's face was cold as he sat next to Ji Yufei. Azure Dragon, why did you invite me here? If you want to fight me, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Ji Yufei said as he stared at the young man in black opposite him. In the private room, besides Hu Zhon, there was also the mysterious young man in purple and Gui Teng, a young powerhouse of the Black Tortoise clan. It was impossible for the older generation to deal with Ji Yufei and the others. Only the young powerhouses of the Southern Wilderness Barbarian clan would be unconvinced and want to get back at them for what they had done last night. Azure Dragon smiled and said, I know your purpose for coming to Dragon Emperor City. If I'm not mistaken, you're going to leave Dragon Emperor City in a few days. How did you know that? Ji Yufei didn't think much of it, but Li Lingfeng couldn't help but be startled by Azure Dragon's words. How shuck, could it be that he knows our secret? Humph. Where is this? This is Dragon Emperor City, the Southern Wilderness. There's nothing that we Southern Wilderness barbarian clans don't know. Furthermore, this has happened more than once. Azure Dragon said coldly. Hearing this, Ji Yufei couldn't help but frown. The Southern Wilderness barbarian clan was not simple. They even knew such a secret. However, why didn't they intervene? Could it be that they were afraid of the 3 great Daoist sects? Since you understand, that's for the best. Goodbye. Ji Yufei didn't want to say more and directly stood up. I want to challenge you. Azure Dragon also stood up and stared at Ji Yufei's face with his bright eyes. An incomparably powerful battle intent surged out of Azure Dragon's body without any scruples. In an instant, Ji Yufei felt a faintly discernible momentum. It had already locked on to him. This force was extremely powerful. This momentum originated from Azure Dragon. The atmosphere in the private room instantly became tense. A tense atmosphere filled every corner and every inch of space in the private room. Hu Zhan, Gui Teng, and the purple-haired youth abruptly stood up. Each of them was emitting a powerful energy wave. They stared at Ji Yufei as if they were going to launch an attack at any time. Especially Hu Zhan, his muscles bulged all over. The muscles on his arms were knotted, and he gave off an extremely powerful oppressive feeling. If it was in normal times, I would be more than willing to fight you. However, now is not the right time. Ji Yufei ignored the provocation of Azure Dragon and the others. Haha, good, good, good. Azure Dragon suddenly burst into laughter as he withdrew all of his momentum. The tense atmosphere in the private room was immediately dissolved by his laughter. I know you will return to Dragon Emperor City in 1 month. The battle between you and me will take place in 1 month, Azure Dragon said. It seemed that he really knew something. This was a top secret even in the 3 great Daoist sects. Even Azure Dragon and the others could know about it. The strength of the Southern Wilderness barbarian tribe could not be underestimated. If I can come back, even if you don't come for me, I will come for you. Ji Yufei calmly glanced over the faces of Azure Dragon and the others. Then, he turned around and walked out of the private room. Li Lingfeng also followed behind Ji Yufei and left this place that made him feel depressed. Boss Azure Dragon, why did you let them go like this? Seeing Ji Yufei's figure disappear at the top of the stairs, Hu Zhan said unhappily. This Ji Yufei had almost killed him. Fortunately, the old ancestor of the tribe made a move in time and saved Hu Zhan from Ji Yufei's swordlight, allowing Hu Zhan to escape from Ji Yufei's swordlight. Of course, Hu Zhan didn't like Ji Yufei. It's not the right time to make a move now. Azure Dragon sighed and sat down again. He picked up the flagon and poured himself a cup of wine. Then, he drank it up. The current Dragon Emperor city was full of hidden forces. The situation was very complicated. If one was not careful, it might lead to a war between the major forces. As the number 1 person in the younger generation of the Azure Dragon clan, Azure Dragon had some scruples. After leaving the drunken immortal residence, Ji Yufei had long lost interest in shopping. Then, he wanted to return to the canvassing moon pavilion. However, when he passed by a shop that sold various kinds of beast crystals, he couldn't help but stop when he saw the various kinds of beast crystals. Junior brother Ji Yu. Li Lingfeng, who had just felt relieved, became anxious again. Actually, the reason why Li Lingfeng accompanied Ji Yufei out was to keep an eye on him. Ji Yufei ignored Li Lingfeng and directly entered the shop. Hee. Little brother, which kind of beast crystal do you want? We have a complete variety of beast crystals here, and the quality is even better. At the sight of Ji Yufei, a tall and thin man hurriedly greeted him with a smile. Flaming Eagle's crystal core, 300 gold, Great Earth Bear's crystal core, 1,000 gold, Twin-headed Earth Python's crystal core, 10,000 gold. Beast crystals of different sizes, colors, and different spiritual source waves were displayed on the crystal counter in the shop. Ji Yufei suddenly remembered that he didn't seem to have any money on him. Ji Yufei couldn't help smiling bitterly. Then, he wanted to turn around and leave. Little brother, wait a moment, I have better beast crystals here. At the sight of Ji Yufei leaving, the tall and thin man immediately went forward to stop Ji Yufei. Ji Yufei couldn't help but stare. His eyes shone brightly, causing the tall and thin man to jump and unconsciously take a step back. Young master, don't be angry. Young master, don't be angry. I really have better beast crystals. They are left behind by a terrifying beast that failed to transform into a demon. The tall and thin man hurriedly took out a brocade box from his body and opened it. A dark green brilliance suddenly shot out from the brocade box. Ji Yufei immediately felt a strong spiritual source wave. It seemed that the intensity of the spiritual source wave was not inferior to the wave emitted from the crystal core of the giant ape that he had killed before. The tall and thin man closed the brocade box. The dark green brilliance that shot out from the box immediately disappeared. At the same time, the brocade box also isolated the spiritual source wave. Just as Ji Yufei was about to leave, 3 people suddenly walked in from outside the shop. Boss bye, you didn't even inform me that you had good stuff. The first person was a short and fat young man dressed in a purple brocade robe. He held a birdcage in his hand and wore a crooked golden crown on his head. In the birdcage, there was a fist-sized bird with a red head and a green body. It was constantly fluttering in the birdcage. He was a complete spoiled brat. The 2 people following behind the short and fat young man, from their attire, should be the young man's attendants. Give it to me. After the short and fat young man holding the birdcage came in, he immediately extended a chubby and fleshy palm in front of the tall and thin man. This young master Zhongli, this young master has already taken a liking to this beast crystal. You see, Boss Bai said with a troubled expression. Obviously, this Boss Bai did not want to sell the beast crystal to this young master Zhongli. Although this beast crystal is good, I did not say that I want to buy it. Ji Yufei was about to speak, but in the next moment, he was choked by young master Zhongli's tone. Humph. What the F***ck? Young master Zhongli threw a disdainful glance at Ji Yufei as he said, go back to where you came from. Nobody in Dragon Emperor City dares touch what this young master has taken a liking to. Boss, I want that beast crystal. Ji Yufei said calmly as he watched young master Zhongli in a ridiculing way. Junior fellow apprentice Ji Yu, it's better to avoid trouble. Li Lingfeng whispered to Ji Yufei. Preposterous. How dare you look down on this young master? Remove the limbs of these 2 fellows for this young master. Before Li Lingfeng finished his words, young master Zhongli had already started to clamor with the birdcage. At once, 7 to 8 tough men rushed in from outside the shop. The 2 burly men at the front didn't say anything and raised their fists to greet Ji Yufei and Li Lingfeng. 3 tough men even drew out their long swords from their waists with clangs. Chapter 149. What a reckless slave. When Ji Yufei raised his hand, the 7 or 8 fierce-looking burly men who had charged into the shop were immediately sent flying back to where they came from. The street was in an uproar at once. You! Fatty Zhongli, who was holding the birdcage in his hand, pointed at Ji Yufei. His face was filled with fear, and his voice was trembling. You what? I'm going to slap you. With a sway of his body, Ji Yufei immediately arrived in front of the fat man. His large hand covered the fat man's chubby, fair, and tender face. Pa! Ji Yufei's slap made the fatty dizzy. The birdcage in his hand also flew off and hit the wall before exploding. The exotic bird in the cage instantly flapped its wings and flew out of the store. It was impossible to kill someone in Dragon Emperor City, especially in the downtown area. However, it was impossible to let this playboy bully him without fighting back. After being slapped by Ji Yufei, the fatty spun around for a few times. After staggering a few steps, he turned around as a big palm print appeared on his fat face. Ji Yufei didn't use too much strength. If he wanted to kill this fatty, he only needed to spit out that immortal weapon's essence. You dare slap me? The fatty widely opened his eyes as if he couldn't believe it. He was extremely furious as he pointed at Ji Yufei and said in a quivering voice, You dare slap me? Do you know who I am? How dare you slap me? Who the hell are you? Ji Yufei said disdainfully as he raised his right hand again. Pa! Another loud slap landed on the fatty's face. The left cheek of the fatty had already swollen. What a slap! Even if he's a relative of the emperor, so what? Damn it, don't leave if you have the guts. 2 resounding slaps in the face made Fatty so ashamed and resentful that his blood vessels were about to burst. He was a direct descendant of the family and was usually high and mighty. When had he ever received such inhuman treatment? With the protection of his clan power, Fatty Zhongli was as aggressive as a crab in Dragon Emperor City. He was always the one who beat others. No one had ever dared to touch him. Of course, a truly formidable person would feel that it was beneath them to bicker with him. Otherwise, this Fatty Zhongli would have died countless times over. However, he really thought that everyone was afraid of him, so he became even more domineering. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, the fat man wanted to slip away. As he spoke harshly, he ran out of the store. Swoosh! Ji Yufei disappeared from where he was and appeared in front of Fatty, blocking his path. Fatty Zhongli seemed to be unable to stop his momentum. Just as he was about to collide with Ji Yufei, a sinister expression suddenly appeared on his face. A short stick-like object appeared in his hand under his large sleeves. "Go to hell!" Fatty Zhongli roared as if he had gone mad. His finger abruptly pressed down on a bulge on the short stick. Pang! Fatty Zhongli's sleeves exploded in a split second as fine blue lights shot out of his sleeves towards Ji Yufei. Everyone was startled by this sudden scene. Li Lingfeng even cried out inwardly, and the shop owner was even more shocked. Ji Yufei and Li Lingfeng didn't know the background of this foppish playboy. However, the boss knew the background of this fatty. Because he knew the background of this fatty, he became more frightened. Despicable bastard. Ji Yufei couldn't help but become angry when he saw that the fatty was actually trying to kill him. If he was an ordinary person, wouldn't he have lost his life here today? Ji Yufei's hand fell forward and the dozens of blue lights were absorbed into his palm. Then, he clenched his hand and the dozens of oxhair steel needles in his palm were immediately crushed into dust. Then, he opened his palm and the faint blue dust sprinkled down from between Ji Yufei's fingers. Fatty Zhongli was stunned by the scene in front of him. He couldn't stop his forward momentum and directly hit Ji Yufei's body. Then, he bounced back and rolled on the ground. Damn you! Ever since Dongfang Long and Beitang Ao plotted against Ji Yufei with poisoned wine, he hated these guys who secretly attacked people. He originally wanted to punish this fatty, but he was really angry now. He directly took a step towards the fatty who had fallen on the ground. Junior fellow apprentice Ji Yu, show mercy, don't kill him. Li Lingfeng was paying attention to Ji Yufei's look. When he found that Ji Yufei really wanted to kill that foppish playboy, Li Lingfeng was startled as he hurriedly stopped him. Li Lingfeng had long realized that this fatty was not an ordinary person. He might be a disciple of a major force in Dragon Emperor City. It was not worthwhile to offend a local force in Dragon Emperor City for this foppish playboy. Young master, please don't kill him for my sake. The tall and skinny shop owner also recovered from the shock at this time. His whole body was suddenly covered in cold sweat, and he hurriedly stepped forward to dissuade them. If this child Zhongli was killed in his own shop, he would have no place to stay in Dragon Emperor City although being large. This child Zhongli must have a great background. Ji Yufei's foot stopped in the air. Although he didn't really step down, his great strength had already pressed the fatty onto the ground, making him unable to move at all. Fatty Zhongli couldn't even speak at this time. He was gasping for breath. He felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on his body. All the bones in his body were cracking, as if they were about to fall apart. It was extremely uncomfortable. Clang, 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 clang. Sounds of weapons being unsheathed drifted from outside the shop. 9 bodyguards rushed in with shiny sabers and swords in their hands. Without any order, they had fiercely slashed towards Ji Yufei. Ji Yufei slightly pressed forward with his right palm. Bang, bang, bang. The crisp sound of metal breaking resounded as the 8 snow-white swords and sabers that were slashing towards them were all broken. The expressions of the 8 people immediately changed. Seeing that Ji Yufei had broken their weapons with just a light press of his palm, they knew that they had kicked an iron plate today. Pa, pa, pa. Ji Yufei slightly turned his palm, sending the 9 bodyguards flying away at once. At this moment, exclamations were heard outside the shop. It seemed that many people had gathered outside to watch the fun. Your Excellency, could you please lift your leg and let go of my third brother? At this moment, a melodious voice drifted in from outside the shop. Closely after that, the light outside the shop dimmed as a peerless beauty walked in. The moment this woman appeared, the light she emitted caused even the light emitted by the beast crystals to dim. Her peerless beauty caused everyone's eyes to light up. There was a peerless beauty in South Wilderness. Her one smile could topple a city, another smile could topple a country. This was an incomparably dazzling beauty. No one could describe her beauty, because all the words of praise seemed incomparably pale in front of her. And who are you? Ji Yufei retracted his right leg and calmly looked at the peerless beauty. It was undeniable that the woman in front of him had indeed stunned Ji Yufei. Of course, This did not mean that this woman was much more beautiful than Zhao Ziru and Ling Luoyang. It could only be said that this woman had a unique temperament that Zhao Ziru and Ling Luoyang did not have. I am Zhong Li Meng. May I know how to address you, young master? Zhong Li Meng's tone was neither servile nor overbearing. The temperament she displayed was many times stronger than that fatty Zhong Li. As for that fatty Zhong Li Meng, after Ji Yufei retracted his leg, he hurriedly crawled up from the ground and hid behind Zhong Li Meng. Sister, quickly help me capture this damned fellow. I want him to suffer a fate worse than death. Zhong Li Meng stared at Ji Yufei and said fiercely while gnashing his teeth. Huh! Ji Yufei glanced at the fatty Zhong Li Meng, his eyes flashing with an ominous glint. Zhong Li Meng immediately became subdued. He had been beaten by Ji Yufei and was afraid. Although his words were fierce, he hid behind his sister and did not dare to face Ji Yufei. Supreme Mystery Sect's Ji Yufei. Ji Yufei could not be bothered with the fatty Zhong Li Meng anymore. He looked at the fairy-like Zhong Li Meng and said coldly. For Ji Yufei, who was obsessed with martial arts, a peerless beauty was nothing more than a skeleton. It was difficult for her to move his heart. He believed that strength determined everything. Ji Yufei? You are Ji Yufei. Zhong Li Meng was obviously shocked. The name Ji Yufei was not unfamiliar to her. The news that the White Tiger clan's Hu Zhon had been defeated by Ji Yufei had already spread far and wide. What, have you heard of me? Ji Yufei said with some surprise. He did not know that his name had already spread among the major forces of the southern wilderness. Haha, of course I know you. I also know that Hu Zhon of the White Tiger clan was defeated by you. He is known as the most outstanding descendant of the White Tiger clan, but he was actually defeated. This matter is enough to shake the entire southern wilderness and cause an uproar among the younger generation, Zhong Li Meng said with a smile. Oh! Ji Yufei did not deny it. This is. Zhong Li Meng's gaze shifted to Li Lingfeng. Supreme Mystery Sect's Li Lingfeng. Li Lingfeng stepped forward and said. Cultivators were naturally indifferent. Although Zhong Li Meng had a peerless beauty, in front of Li Lingfeng, she was nothing more than a beautiful body. Zhong Li Meng could already tell from the eyes of both Ji Yufei and Li Lingfeng that her beauty had no power in front of these two. Ah, so it is Supreme Mystery Sect's eldest senior brother. I have been disrespectful. Zhong Li Meng nodded to Li Lingfeng. At this time, everyone seemed to have forgotten the existence of the fat Zhong Li, which made the fat Zhong Li Meng very depressed. Why are you still not leaving? Zhong Li Meng suddenly said to the fat Zhong Li Meng in a low voice, then turned to Ji Yufei and said, My third brother has always been impulsive. If he has offended you in any way, for my sake, how about we write it off? The fat Zhong Li Meng did not know what to do. He hurriedly walked out of the shop and left under the protection of the guards. Ji Yufei snorted coldly and did not say anything more. Li Lingfeng could not wait to make a big deal out of a small matter, and Boss Bai of the shop naturally had no objections. However, a conflict had arrived, and in a few words, it had turned into smoke. Chapter 150. Ji Yufei didn't refuse Zhong Li Meng's invitation. Instead, he left the store. Under the guidance of Zhong Li Meng, Ji Yufei and Li Lingfeng entered a palace in Dragon Emperor City. Zhong Li clan played an important role in Dragon Emperor City. As one of the major forces in South Wilderness, it was not strange for them to have a complex of palaces in Dragon Emperor City. Of course, when Ji Yufei left the shop that sold beast crystals, he exchanged the beast crystal left behind by the ferocious beast that failed to attain rebirth and become a demon with a Dao art talisman. Seeing Ji Yufei exchanging a high-level talisman for a beast crystal, Li Lingfeng couldn't help but feel pained. As for the shop owner, he was extremely happy, because the value of the Dao talisman with Dao energy sealed within it was much higher than that beast crystal. Ferocious beast crystal nuclei were plentiful in the southern wasteland. As for Taoist talismans, even in the world of cultivation, they were rare and priceless items. The talisman that Ji Yufei exchanged for the beast crystal was the one that he got from Wang Yuanji, a disciple of Great Void Peak. Wang Yuanji had never imagined that his life-saving talisman could be exchanged by Ji Yufei for beast crystals. The reason why Ji Yufei suddenly wanted to buy beast crystals was because of the bizarre Xiaoqing snake which had taken his magic equipment pouch as its nest. The green snake could devour and refine the spiritual source in beast crystals. Ji Yufei wanted to know what kind of existence this Xiaoqing snake would become after refining numerous beast crystals. Ji Yufei knew that beasts that could devour and refine beast crystals definitely had endless potential. Zhongli Meng led Ji Yufei and the others into a palace. After that, they sat down respectively. A group of maids immediately served all kinds of desserts and placed them on the table in front of each of them. Brother Ji Yu, I have a person who has been thinking about you day and night. After sitting down, Zhongli Meng covered his face with his sleeve and said with a sweet smile. Oh! Ji Yufei became stunned. It seems that I didn't have any romantic affairs in the secular world. I want to see who that person is. Sister Ling, come out. Zhongli Meng shouted towards the back of the palace. Then, a person walked out from the back of the palace. When Ji Yufei saw that person, he couldn't help but frown. Not only did he know this person, he was also very familiar with him. Ji Yufei, it's really you. The person who walked out from the back hall was a handsome young master who was waving a folding fan in his hand. However, this young master's voice was very delicate. When that person saw Ji Yufei, she was immediately overjoyed. She wanted to pounce on Ji Yufei and throw herself into his wide and sturdy embrace. However, her feet seemed to have taken root on the ground and she did not move at all. It's you. The person who came out from the back hall had a special relationship with him. This was because the person who walked out was Ling Luoyang, who was disguised as a man. Although the beautiful Ling Luoyang was dressed as a man, her peerless beauty was hard to conceal, and she wasn't inferior to Zhongli Meng in the slightest. Her skin was like white jade, and her eyes were like autumn waters. Her slender body and graceful figure were like the morning air that was filled with freshness. She was truly graceful and elegant. Ling Luoyang, who was dressed as a man, had a different kind of beauty to her. Seeing how cold Ji Yufei was towards her, as if they were strangers, Ling Luoyan's eyes couldn't help but turn red. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stood there in a daze, as if she had lost a moment. The exceptionally intelligent Zhongli Meng immediately noticed something from their expressions. The relationship between the two of them didn't seem to be ordinary. Ji Yufei didn't expect to see Ling Luoyang here. A trace of astonishment appeared on his face, but he quickly returned to normal. Little sister Ling, little sister Ling. Zhongli Meng called out a few times before Ling Luoyan's soul returned to her senses. Seeing Ling Luoyang like this, she couldn't help but shake her head. At this time, even Li Lingfeng could tell that this woman who came out of the rear hall dressed as a man treated Ji Yufei a little differently. When did junior brother Ji Yu get to know this woman? Li Lingfeng was a little puzzled. Ji Yufei had always been cultivating in Taishan Mountain, and he had never left the mountain. Even if Li Lingfeng scratched her head, she would never have imagined that Ji Yufei had met Ling Luoyang during the period when he went missing in Yunmeng Mountain, and that there had been some misunderstanding between the two of them. Little sister Ling, come and sit here. Zhongli Meng patted the seat beside him and said to Ling Luoyang. Ling Luoyang walked to Zhongli Meng's side absent-mindedly and sat down. Her eyes were filled with tenderness and sorrow as she looked at Ji Yufei. Anyone would be moved by such emotions. Ji Yufei was a normal man. How could he not see Ling Luoyan's intentions when such a beautiful woman was interested in him? However, the world of cultivation was filled with dangers, and Ji Yufei wasn't strong enough. If his state of mind was disturbed by worldly love, it would be difficult for him to reach the pinnacle of cultivation. Brother Ji Yu, my little sister Ling seems to be deeply in love with you. Do you want to express something? Zhongli Meng winked at Ji Yufei and said slyly. Express what? Ji Yufei said expressionlessly. What an unromantic rock. Zhongli Meng couldn't help but say. As he looked around, it was as if 100 flowers were blooming, causing everyone's eyes to light up. When Ling Luoyang heard Ji Yufei's reply, she couldn't help but reveal a trace of sadness in her eyes. Zhongli Meng wanted to say more, but at that moment, a blazing wave of heat suddenly came from outside the hall. It was a wave of fire-like energy. Zhongli Meng, I'm here. Then, A gentle voice with a hint of firmness could be heard from outside the hall. From the voice, it could be seen that it was a woman. Oh no, why is she here? When she heard that voice, Zhong Li Meng's expression changed and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. She seemed to be a little worried about the woman who had suddenly appeared outside the hall. While the voice was still echoing in the hall, Ji Yufei and the others saw a figure in a fiery red robe striding in from outside the door. It was a woman, a young woman in her early 20s. She wore a fiery red, tight-fitting robe, and her hair was tied into a ponytail. She had a beautiful face, a slender figure, and a valiant and heroic bearing. This woman looked like a valiant general charging through enemy lines, and she carried a fiery red spear on her back. The tip of the spear was also fiery red, as if it was burning with a divine flame. What a strong woman! Ji Yufei and the others felt a strong sense of oppression from this woman. The blazing wave of heat came from this woman's body. As soon as she stepped into the hall, the temperature in the hall immediately shot up. Ji Yufei, Li Lingfeng, and Zhong Li Meng didn't feel any discomfort, but Ling Luoyang, who didn't have a high cultivation base, felt unbearably hot, as if she was sitting next to a bonfire. The red-clothed woman's gaze swept across the hall and finally landed on Ji Yufei. The woman looked at Ji Yufei and suddenly revealed a bright smile. Why is she smiling at me? Ji Yufei's heart skipped a beat. At the same time, a bad premonition surged in his heart, causing him to be wary of this woman. At this moment, a swoosh. The red-clothed woman disappeared on the spot and turned into a ray of fiery light. She used her palm like a blade, and the fiery light burst forth as she slashed at Ji Yufei 3 times. The red-clothed woman wasn't completely fearless. She had restrained the vast fire elemental energy to an extremely small area in her palm, evidently not wanting to cause any damage to the things in the hall. The heat wave was oppressive. Under the envelopment of the 3 fiery blade auras, Ji Yufei felt as if he was in a sea of fire. He sat still and directly threw out 3 punches. His punches were colorless, but they miraculously blocked the 3 fiery blade auras. Crack! The floor beneath the red-clothed woman's feet instantly cracked from her stomp, and she was forced to take a step back from the recoil. In an instant, it seemed as if the winner had been decided. Seeing this scene, Li Lingfeng couldn't help but feel uneasy. He definitely didn't want anything to happen in these 2 or 3 days. However, it was obvious that the young experts of the southern wilderness weren't convinced and had begun to look for trouble. As the saying goes, the tree wants peace, but the wind won't stop. He didn't want to look for trouble, but trouble came knocking on his door. Good, as expected of the Taoism expert who defeated Hu Zhon. The red-clothed woman looked at Ji Yufei, and a terrifying power surged from her body. She didn't even bother to conceal her battle intent. Everyone's expression changed. The southern wilderness was a land of great heroes and geniuses. It really couldn't be underestimated. The woman in front of them was definitely a leading figure of the young generation in the southern wilderness. The phoenix perches on the parasol tree, and the fire shines on the south. Princess Feng of the Vermilion Bird Tribe has graced my humble abode with your presence. It's truly an honor. At this moment, Zhong Li Meng had already stood up and welcomed her with a smile. The Vermilion Bird Tribe. Ji Yufei stood up as well. A pulse of energy as tremendous as the ocean and as heavy as a mountain radiated from Ji Yufei. His eyes flickered with a gaze as sharp as a blade as he stared at the princess before him. His battle intent surged, as if he wanted to fight her. The Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise were the outstanding successors of the 4 sacred clans of the southern wilderness. Ji Yufei had already met all of them. Every single one of them was an impressive young expert, possessing strength that allowed them to look down on their peers. Feng Shiwu of the Vermilion Bird clan. The princess did not waste any time, directly stating her name. Afterwards, she extended her hand and drew the spear on her back. With a shake of the spear, it was like a venomous dragon had emerged from the sea. The tip of the spear was directly pointed at Ji Yufei. The spear in her hand was engraved with simple, fiery patterns. It seemed to be forged from divine metal that still gave off flames, and it seemed to be enveloped in a layer of fire. This was definitely a rare god armament. The presence of the god armament merged with Feng Shiwu's presence, giving off a feeling like she had become one with the spear. Chapter 151. Boom. A great rumble rang out in the battlefield. It was like a clap of thunder. The surging ripples of energy alarmed the Zhongli family of Dragon Emperor City. The descendants of the Zhongli family were extremely surprised. They all rushed out of their places of cultivation and made their way to the clan's battlefield. End of story. Two silhouettes that were as fast as the wind and as fast as lightning moved on the huge white jade fighting field. They repeatedly blasted out terrifying killing moves that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. The intense energy collided, causing the open-air white jade fighting field of the Zhong family to tremble unceasingly. The Zhongli family truly was extravagant. The colossal battlefield was actually completely constructed out of premium white jade. They had even set up a formation in the battlefield, sealing up and nullifying the terrifying power that the experts in the battlefield had erupted with. By now, the formation of the battlefield had already been activated. At this moment, every piece of white jade that made up the arena emitted a misty brilliance. An unfathomable power sealed the entire arena, completely dispelling the residual power that leaked out, preventing it from being destroyed. Clearly, the Zhongli clan's battle arena was extraordinary. It was specially constructed for battles between experts. The vast and terrifying power of the two experts in the battle arena was completely sealed within the battle arena. Only a very small amount of power was able to break through the seal and leak out. Outside the battlefield, Li Lingfeng, Zhong Limeng, and Ling Luoyang all watched the battle nervously. It had to be mentioned that the strength of the two people in the battlefield was enough for them to look down on their peers. As it turned out, the battle between Feng Shiwu of the Vermilion Bird clan and Ji Yufei was already unavoidable. Both of them were eager for battle, so they had already drawn their swords in the hall. They had almost attacked each other. Fortunately, Zhong Limeng had arrived in time and brought the two of them to the white jade battlefield of the clan, allowing them to fight to their heart's content without any worries. The clothes on Ji Yufei's upper body were already in tatters. His upper body, which seemed to be forged from refined iron, contained an extremely tyrannical strength. With just a single step, Ji Yufei vanished from where he was. Only an extremely faint blur remained in the air. He was just too fast, so fast that he was basically unrecognizable to the naked eye. A punch, a very ordinary punch, directly landed on the tip of Feng Shiwu's spear. The tremendous power shook the ground. Bang! With a bang, the fist and the spearhead, which was wreathed in raging flames, instantly collided. It was like two pieces of godly metal colliding, and a glaring light burst out, causing people to close their eyes subconsciously. A powerful energy fluctuation that could topple the mountains and overturn the seas exploded in an instant. The shaft of the raging flames' divine spear was bent by Ji Yufei's powerful punch. Feng Shiwu's hands had almost lost their grip on the spear. Her palms and even her arms had all suffered from the violent impact from the spear. She could not help but be surprised by Ji Yufei's strength. Using one's own body to fight against the divine spear in one's hand, even in the southern wasteland, none of the young experts from the other forces would dare to be so crazy. Even the number one person of the Azure Dragon clan's younger generation, Azure Dragon, did not dare to do so. Ji Yufei seemed like a colossal mountain, radiating with unfathomable power. He knocked Feng Shiwu back with a punch, and the ground of the battlefield leapt up with his seemingly ordinary punch. As if it were not for the unfathomable power that blocked Ji Yufei's punch, the jade tiles of the battlefield had leapt up a long time ago before shattering to dust. Vermilion Bird divine skill, spear strikes at the 9 heavens. Feng Shiwu bellowed out and raised the raging flames divine spear in her hand. The spear that had been bent by Ji Yufei's punch immediately straightened. Afterwards, the tip of the spear erupted with light that resembled the scorching sun, stabbing towards Ji Yufei's chest like a star. Roaring flames swept out from Feng Shiwu's body, swallowing her along with the spear that she had sent towards Ji Yufei in a single moment. A colossal figure of a vermilion bird and a fire phoenix appeared. The cry of a phoenix rang through the 9 heavens. The vermilion bird and fire phoenix condensed from endless flames flapped its wings and raised its head, pecking towards Ji Yufei. The spectators outside the battlefield were extremely shocked. The phoenix formed from flames shook up an entire region. The people of the Zhongli family knew that an expert of the Vermilion Bird clan was fighting in the battlefield. The terrifyingly high temperature was enough to melt metal, but Ji Yufei, who was facing this high temperature, treated it as a gentle breeze. His bright eyes were fixed on the huge phoenix that was anxiously pecking at him. In the eyes of others, it was a phoenix condensed from the flames of the Vermilion Bird. However, his gaze pierced through the layer of flames outside, seeing a ball of light as resplendent as a star hidden within the phoenix. The ball of light was condensed from the tip of Feng Shiwu's spear. Under the thrust, the space shook up, and transparent ripples expanded from the phoenix. Feng Shiwu's spear was unstoppable. Although it was not as terrifying as stirring up the 9 heavens, it truly shook up an entire region of the world. His body brimming with power left behind a blur. Ji Yufei advanced instead of retreating, directly throwing a punch at the incoming phoenix without the slightest hesitation. Boom! It was as if a thunderbolt had descended from the 9th heaven, and a deafening sound pierced through the sky. In that instant, the battle arena emitted a bright light, and mysterious runes appeared on the white jade bricks of the battle arena, blocking the energy storm that had erupted. Even with that being the case, the entire battlefield shook. Over a dozen figures rushed over, but with a wave of Zhongli Meng's hand, they immediately backed off silently. Clearly, the experts of the Zhongli family stationed in Dragon Emperor City had been alarmed. A startling sight unfolded in the battlefield. A wild figure threw a punch at the Vermilion Bird and Fire Phoenix the size of a hill, wreathed in flames. Before the Vermilion Bird and Fire Phoenix condensed from endless flames, the figure was so insignificant. However, it was this insignificant figure that had shaken up the colossal Vermilion Bird and Fire Phoenix. The Vermilion Bird and Fire Phoenix collapsed. Afterwards, as if there was a chain reaction, the mountain-sized Vermilion Bird and Fire Phoenix collapsed from the head to the neck, then to the body. It completely collapsed, dispersing into nothingness. Clang! A fiery red figure flew out from the dispersing flames. Thump, thump, thump. After landing on the ground, the fiery red figure staggered over a dozen steps back. Clang! He stabbed the spear into the ground behind him, and only then did he stop his retreat. Ji Yufei was like a ferocious beast, emitting a boundless ferocious aura as he took large strides forward. With every step he took, the ground trembled, and the power of the earth rushed out from the ground. Fist of Earth. Endless power of the earth gathered towards Ji Yufei's right fist from all directions. Afterwards, he directly threw a punch at Feng Shiwu. Grey light surged forward, as terrifying as the waves. Feng Shiwu's expression immediately changed. Having fought until now, he could not help but admit that he was not Ji Yufei's opponent. Tiger's defeat was not undeserved. This Ji Yufei's strength had indeed surpassed the boundary of the self-awakening realm. Seeing how the grey power of the Fist of Earth had already completely sealed off the path ahead, Feng Shiwu pushed off the ground without even thinking, turning into a phoenix and rushing into the air, avoiding the power of the fist. At the same time, the spear in his hand erupted with resplendent light, piercing through space and stabbing towards Ji Yufei. The light from the spear was like a rainbow, ripping through the surroundings. It was as resplendent as lightning, radiating with a chilling aura of destruction. Ji Yufei snorted coldly. He took a step and rose into the air. Boom! The unparalleled light from the spear immediately struck where Ji Yufei stood before. The ground did not explode. An unfathomable power nullified all of the terrifying power in the light. Streaks of light slithered about on the ground like silver snakes. Feng Shiwu's full-powered strike failed to shake up the battlefield, nor did it destroy it. Ji Yufei rushed into the air with a single step before striding through the air. With a single step, terrifying power immediately surged beneath his feet, which he then rushed towards Feng Shiwu. Just admit defeat. You're not my opponent. Ji Yufei gazed at Feng Shiwu below and said proudly. His voice echoed through the battlefield. Desolate steps, 8 kills. A single step was as heavy as a mountain, suddenly appearing above Feng Shiwu's head. It made Feng Shiwu feel like Mount Tai was pressing down on him. When the desolate steps was fast, it could reach the extremities of 8 steps. When it faced an enemy, it could also reach the extremities of 8 steps. A single step was enough to unleash the might of collapsing mountains. There's no such thing as admitting defeat in my dictionary. Fire Phoenix dances through the 9 heavens. Feng Shiwu bellowed out. Afterwards, a tremendous pulse of energy erupted from her body. Roaring flames surged from her body, and she seemed to turn into a fire phoenix that soared above the 9 heavens. In a split second, she charged out from under Ji Yufei's desolate steps. Ji Yufei followed up with a second step. Like he had teleported, he appeared above Feng Shiwu in the blink of an eye. Terrifying power surged beneath his feet, and transparent ripples expanded into the surroundings. Even the space around him had twisted. Although he was 20 to 30 meters away from the ground of white jade still trembled constantly despite being protected by power. However, it was not destroyed. What a terrifying ability! Outside the battlefield, Zhong Liming exclaimed. She was extremely surprised that Ji Yufei's power could actually shake up the battlefield. That's not an ability. Li Lingfeng stared at the figure in the sky that resembled both a god and a demon. Her eyes shone brilliantly. Not an ability. Could it be a Dao technique? Zhong Li Meng exclaimed. She did not sense any Dao technique fluctuations from Ji Yufei's body. It's not a mystique or a Daoist technique, but it's better than a mystique or a Daoist technique. What he cultivates is martial, Li Lingfeng murmured with a calm expression. Woo! The martial Dao actually has such a great power that it can rival divine abilities and Dao techniques. Not only was Zhong Li Meng shocked, even Ling Luoyang was shocked. The inheritance of the ancient martial way had long been severed. The so-called martial skills in the world, however, did not have martial, only skills. Martial techniques without martial couldn't be compared to divine abilities and Dao arts at all. The people of the younger generation had long since forgotten what martial arts was. When Li Lingfeng said that what Ji Yufei practiced was actually martial arts, Zhong Li Meng and the rest were shocked. Martial techniques were mediocre and could not be considered elegant. This was already a common understanding among the current generation of cultivators. However, what they did not know was that in ancient times, cultivators who had achieved success in cultivation were enough to slaughter immortals, gods, and demons. They were terrifying existences that were almost undefeatable. With Ji Yufei's second step, Feng Shiwu was in danger. Wind and lightning seemed to surge beneath Ji Yufei's feet, whistling wildly. Chapter 152. Taking a step through the air, Ji Yufei took a second step. Wind and lightning immediately surged beneath his feet. Piercing gales seemed to sweep through the sky, and an indescribable pressure filled the battlefield. Let's do it. The power of Ji Yufei's step was as violent as a landslide, sealing up the surroundings and causing the space to distort violently as if it was about to collapse. She could not dodge at all. All Feng Shiwu could do was grit her teeth and unleash her power desperately, pouring it into the spear in her hand. Afterwards, she directly thrust it towards Ji Yufei's right foot. Swish! The air was immediately pierced, and the space there trembled. The spear was like a venomous dragon emerging from its lair. The tip of the spear turned into a streak of light, piercing through the air and colliding viciously with Ji Yufei's right foot. Peng! Feng Shiwu directly retreated. Even the webbing between her thumb and index finger had ruptured from the impact. A sliver of blood oozed from the corner of her lips. She had already shown signs of defeat. However, Feng Shiwu possessed the bloodline of the divine bird of the south. Like a phoenix bathed in fire, her presence instead became even more powerful after being injured. Flames surged from her body, and the space around her distorted from the heat of the flames. It was extremely terrifying. Ji Yufei's gaze was as sharp as a blade. The profound art in his body circulated rapidly, pushing his strength to the limit. As his right foot endured the violent power that erupted, he had already stepped out with his left foot. Swish! Ji Yufei's figure directly vanished. With his third step, he enveloped Feng Shiwu again, sealing up the surroundings with the power of destruction. The ground is beneath my feet. Ji Yufei seemed to have become an unkillable god of war that looked down on the world. His unparalleled presence that trampled over the surroundings made the hearts of everyone outside shiver. Such vigor only made Zhong Liming and Ling Luoyan's eyes shine with interest. Li Lingfeng, on the other hand, had a solemn look on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Damn it! Feng Shiwu roared furiously inside. She felt like she still could not dodge. She had no other choice. She shook the spear of flames with all her strength and unleashed a power that was as vast as waves. She raised the spear to resist, and the spear erupted with resplendent light that could even make the sun pale. She forcefully clashed with Ji Yufei. The sound of cracking could be heard continuously. The white jade ground began to crack. The entire white jade arena looked like it was being crushed by a huge mountain, constantly cracking. However, in the end, it was not an ordinary fighting ground. It was made of white jade and had the protection of a formation. After the cracks on the ground collapsed, they quickly reformed. Then, with a flash of green light, the ground instantly returned to its original state. The battlefield of the Zhongli family seemed very difficult to destroy. At the very least, it was not something that Ji Yufei and Feng Shiwu could destroy. But even then, some of the older generation experts of the Zhongli clan were already shocked in their hearts. Being able to collapse the arena was sufficient to show how terrifying the cultivations of these two young men in battle were. He was already comparable to those of the older generation. Bang! Feng Shiwu was knocked back once again. She coughed up blood and staggered a few steps back. Her hair was in a mess, but she still gripped the spear of flames firmly, brimming with battle intent. Roar! Feng Shiwu roared at the sky. At this moment, she was no longer a woman, but a warrior who lived for battle. The Vermilion Bird clan's mysterious method of the Undying Phoenix circulated to the limit, and the form of the Undying Phoenix appeared on her. She sprayed with a mouthful of blood, and the flames on her seemed to have been doused with kerosene. With a whoosh, they immediately flourished. The flames on her had already become almost transparent. They radiated with terrifying heat, causing the ground around her to crackle and crackle. Sparks flew everywhere and streamed with light. The terror of the Undying Phoenix was beyond doubt. Feng Shiwu was like an undying vermilion bird. Every time she was injured, she seemed to unleash even greater power, and her wounds would heal in an instant too. As long as she was not fatally injured, she was an undying cockroach. All right, let's see if you can withstand my fourth step, Ji Yufei said sternly. With his fourth step, Ji Yufei seemed to become the world, merging with the space there. Afterwards, he led a region of the world downwards. Rumble. Heaven and earth seemed to be collapsing. As Ji Yufei took his fourth step, a terrifying power came crashing down. This time, Feng Shiwu struggled to maintain her composure. She could already tell that Ji Yufei's cultivation had actually already touched the edge of Wei's. Skill was close to Wei's. That was the unique ability of transcending mortality. He was only a hair's breadth away from transcending mortality, but breaking through the shackles of the ninth heavenly layer was anything but easy. End of Book 2. To Ji Yufei, who had embarked on the path of martial arts, it was even more difficult. However, as a fighter, even if Ji Yufei had not broken through to transcending mortality, he possessed the strength of transcending mortality. Faced with the terrifying attack that seemed like the collapse of the world, Feng Shiwu's eyes that looked at Ji Yufei shone with a sharp light. She was not afraid. Surging battle intent erupted. The more pressure Ji Yufei gave her, the better. It would be best if he could threaten her life. Only then would she be able to break through her current bottleneck in cultivation. Tempered in pressure, refined between life and death. Tremendous power erupted from Feng Shiwu. She was even more valiant and threatening than the man. Surging flames immediately filled the entire corner of the battlefield, incinerating everything. The protective formation of the battlefield had been completely activated. Within the hazy light, transparent inscriptions constantly flickered, restraining and blocking the power in the battlefield, preventing it from leaking out. If the power that Ji Yufei and Feng Shiwu gave off leaked out of the battlefield, the hall of the Zhongli family in Dragon Emperor City would be reduced to ruins. The more powerful they were, the more powerful they would become. Feng Shiwu of the Vermilion Bird clan had clearly reached a bottleneck in her cultivation, which was why she had come looking for Jiyu Fei without any regard, requesting a battle. At such a sensitive time, none of the organizations in Dragon Emperor City were willing to act recklessly. Not only had the people of the three major schools of Taoism entered the southern wilderness, but even demonic cultivators and diamonds had begun appearing in the southern wilderness too. If it was diamonds, then so be it. They were sentient beings in the world after all, having developed intelligence and cultivated to this level. However, demonic cultivators were different. Demonic cultivators could be described as the enemies of all cultivators on the Ting-Long continent. Slaughtering the people and massacring the world was demonic. However, Feng Shiwu did not care that much. Other people had qualms, afraid of attacking Jiyu Fei, but she had no qualms at all. After receiving the news that Jiyu Fei was in the Zhongli family, she came looking for him immediately. An opponent like Jiyu Fei was exactly what she needed right now. Against an opponent like Jiyu Fei, the bloodline of the vermilion bird in Feng Shiwu's body seemed to awaken. Resplendent flames erupted from her body. A divine bird of fire struggled on her body as if it wanted to burst out. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. At this moment, Jiyu Fei's fourth step had already arrived. The sky erupted with chilling ripples as a sharp and terrifying aura of destruction swept over. Waves of energy shook up the sky. Feng Shiwu sensed great danger. Rumble. The terrifying sound waves, enough to shatter the world, made her feel like her head was splitting. The sound waves actually directly passed through and shook up her soul. Boom. Even the sky trembled. The disturbance was extremely startling. With a stomp, space completely distorted, erupting with the greatest power. At this moment, Jiyu Fei had also unleashed his greatest battle prowess. 8 steps 8 kills. With his current cultivation, he could only barely reach the 4th step. He had already pushed all of his martial arts to the limits of what his body could endure. Using a martial skill to draw on the power of the world and erupt with a stomp, the impact his body had to endure was unimaginable. Jiyu Fei's face was extremely solemn. With a stomp of his foot, the surging divine flames below immediately collapsed and dissipated without a sound. In the sea of flames, a flaming divine bird was about to struggle out, but it was stomped back by Jiyu Fei. As if he had been struck by lightning, Feng Shiwu shuddered violently before being blown away by the tremendous force. She struggled to hold onto the spear in her hand any longer. It flew out of her hand, splattering the battlefield with blood. The flames in the sky vanished, and Jiyu Fei drifted down from above. His bearing of looking down on the world was completely revealed. All the spectators outside the battlefield could not help but be shaken. Feng Shiwu's delicate body directly passed through the screen of light. With a boom, she smashed a pavilion on the side of the battlefield to pieces, rolling into the dust. A descendant of the south is nothing more than this. Jiyu Fei was extremely forceful. With a swish, he directly charged out of the battlefield, continuing to press towards Feng Shiwu. In Jiyu Fei's eyes, Feng Shiwu was not a woman, but an opponent. He would not show mercy just because she was a woman. Everyone outside the battlefield was astounded. Zhong Limeng's expression became very ugly too. After all, this was the Zhong family. If anything happened to Feng Shiwu, their Zhong family would be in great trouble too. Brother Jiyu, wait. Junior brother Jiyu, stop before you go too far. Zhong Limeng and Li Lingfeng stopped him in a hurry. The Vermilion Bird clan of the south possessed an endless heritage in the south. They were as numerous as the clouds in the sky. Even when up against Daoist sects like the 3 great sects of Taoism, they would not falter. This was what Zhong Limeng and Li Lingfeng were worried about. Jiyu Fei stopped, and Zhong Limeng and Li Lingfeng both let out a sigh of relief. However, Jiyu Fei did not stop because of what they said. Instead, when Jiyu Fei pressed towards Feng Shiwu, he suddenly felt a sense of alarm, which made him shudder with fear. It was as if a primordial beast was staring at him from the shadows. Yeah, there really is someone behind this Feng Shiwu. There's a master secretly protecting her. Jiyu Fei thought of something and immediately understood. The people of the south are far too protective of their own. At a crucial moment, someone jumps out and saves her. Jiyu Fei could not help but feel extremely disdainful. Sure enough, the moment Ji Yufei stopped, a figure suddenly appeared in the shattered pavilion and scooped up Feng Shiwu. Feng Shiwu was quite injured this time. The power of her bloodline that was about to awaken had been forcefully forced back into her body by Ji Yufei, which was a huge blow to her. However, she had achieved her objective as well. The bottleneck to her cultivation had already loosened up. She believed that before long, her cultivation would reach a new level. It was a middle-aged woman. After scooping up Feng Shiwu, she glanced at Ji Yufei coldly before saying nothing else. She flew off with Feng Shiwu in her arms. At the same time, the spear of flames was sucked away by her, vanishing from everyone's vision very quickly. At this moment, a strand of firelight suddenly flew over from the sky before stopping in front of Li Lingfeng. Afterwards, the firelight condensed into a line of words before vanishing into thin air. A communication talisman? Zhong Limeng could not help but be taken aback when he saw this. Chapter 153. Fire talisman imparting technique could even be used by cultivators who had awakened their cultivation base. However, it was not an easy task to cultivate this Dao technique to the point where it could travel 1,000 li in a breath and reach others with unerring accuracy. Outside the Zhongli clan's arena, Li Lingfeng immediately called out to Ji Yufei to leave as soon as he saw the fire talisman. It seemed that something had happened that made Li Lingfeng extremely nervous. Ji Yufei was startled, but he didn't stop. His figure flashed, and he turned into an extremely faint shadow as he chased after Li Lingfeng. Ji Yufei! Ling Luoyang exclaimed outside the arena. After coming to Dragon Emperor City, she had finally seen Ji Yufei again. However, Ji Yufei had already left after only a few words. She couldn't help but feel anxious. Although Ji Yufei heard Ling Luoyan's voice, he didn't stop. His figure flashed a few times, and he disappeared from the sky above the palaces in the blink of an eye. The setting sun shone in the west, and the sunset glow was like fire. A few birds flew past the horizon, and it was quiet around the Zhongli clan's arena. Zhongli Meng lowered his head, and no one knew what he was thinking. However, Ling Luoyang looked in the direction where Ji Yufei had disappeared with a disappointed expression. It could be seen that she had truly fallen in love with Ji Yufei. After a long while, whispers could be heard outside the arena. Only then did the group of Zhongli clan disciples recover their wits, and they started to talk about the marvelous battle just now. After exchanging glances with each other, the older generation experts of the Zhongli clan left. This battle was destined to be known throughout the southern wilderness. Ji Yufei's name was unparalleled in Dragon Emperor City, and he became the focus of all the cultivators in the southern wilderness. After defeating Hu Zhon, an elite of the younger generation of the White Tiger clan, and the genius girl of the Vermilion Bird clan, it would be hard for Ji Yufei not to become famous. However, this also caused some young cultivators who wanted to become famous to have their eyes on Ji Yufei. They wanted to step on Ji Yufei and make him their stepping stone. However, there were not many people who dared to look for Ji Yufei. After all, his strength was there for all to see. After defeating the experts of the White Tiger clan and the Vermilion Bird clan, Ji Yufei had become the king among his peers. In a pavilion in Dragon Emperor City, a handsome young man with long eyebrows in cyan clothes was holding a piece of intelligence sent by his subordinate with a solemn look. Ji Yufei, I did not misjudge you. You will be the strongest opponent I, Azure Dragon, have faced since my debut. Our battle. I look forward to it. The green-robed youth clenched his fist, and the silk cloth in his hand immediately shattered into thousands of pieces. The news of Ji Yufei defeating Feng Shiwu had already reached the Azure Dragon's hands. Humph. Ji Yufei, you're really lucky, even the Southern Wastelands experts couldn't defeat you, what a pity. At the same time, in another place of Dragon Emperor City, a youth in white clothes with a quaint long saber on his waist was muttering by the window. Outside the window, there was a small bridge and flowing water. Several palaces could be vaguely seen among the red flowers and green leaves. This was a rare garden. How great would it be if my Dongfang family could use someone like this? However, since you've already become my enemy, I can only kill you. Next time, you won't be so lucky. The youth's eyes shone with viciousness. At this moment, Ji Yufei had already returned to the canvassing Lunar restaurant with Li Lingfeng. As soon as they set foot in the canvassing Lunar restaurant, they sensed that something was wrong with the atmosphere. After entering the Canvas Moon Pavilion, when the disciples of the Supreme Mystery Sect were staying in the courtyard, they saw that inside the courtyard, Ziyu and the other 8 disciples of the Supreme Mystery Sect were already waiting. What's going on? As soon as Li Lingfeng entered the courtyard, he asked Ziyu in a low voice. The fire talisman message did not explain why he and Ji Yufei had been summoned back. It was only said that it was an extremely urgent matter. However, Li Lingfeng knew that if there wasn't an emergency, the sect would not use fire talisman messages. After all, fire talisman messages were like the legends of the flying swords of Guangqing Immortal Sect. They would not easily send out such messages to their disciples, unless there was an emergency. Ziyu shook his head at Li Lingfeng. At this moment, in the courtyard, the door to Dan Chunzi's room was pushed open. He took a step out, and the ground seemed to shrink to an inch, as if he was teleporting. His figure flashed, and Dan Chunzi was already in front of everyone. "You're back," Dan Chunzi said calmly as he glanced at Li Lingfeng and Ji Yufei. "Greetings, Uncle Master." Everyone hurriedly bowed. Dan Chunzi's seniority was extremely high in the sect, and he was regarded as the cultivator with the greatest chance to become a great cultivator. Dan Chunzi's seniority was much higher than that of the masters of everyone present. He was an influential figure in the Taishen sect. Otherwise, he would not have been sent by Daoist Shentian to take charge of this trip to the ruined sky. Dan Chunzi nodded, then said, "Things have changed, so I called you all here." "All right, quickly pack up. We'll be leaving immediately." Leaving immediately? The most outstanding disciples of the younger generation of the Taishen sect could not help but look at each other in shock. Ji Yufei also could not help but frown. However, no one had any objections, because Dan Chunzi's words were an order. As juniors, they had to obey absolutely. Therefore, after a moment of shock, everyone immediately dispersed and rushed back to their residences. Ji Yufei had nothing on him. Everything that was useful was on him, so he had nothing to pack. Everyone had returned to their residences, and only he was still standing there. Dan Chunzi looked at Ji Yufei with some surprise. "You don't have anything to pack?" When Ji Yufei heard this, he replied, "Martial uncle, my things don't leave me easily." Very good. Dan Chunzi nodded. He was very satisfied with Ji Yufei's performance. Ji Yufei had been preparing at all times. This kind of seriousness was very rare. "I also heard a little about what happened in the past 2 days. You did very well. You have made our Taishen sect proud." Dan Chunzi looked at Ji Yufei with a rare smile on his face. Ji Yufei's face was still calm. He did not show any emotion at Dan Chunzi's praise. He calmly said, "This is nothing." Ji Yufei's tone was as if he was talking about something unimportant. This surprised Dan Chunzi a little, and he looked at Ji Yufei with interest. "If you knew where those people came from, you would know how amazing what you have done is," Dan Chunzi said. At this time, the others had already packed up their things and were walking over. After a while, everyone was neatly equipped and stood in front of Dan Chunzi. They were valiant and high-spirited, and they had the spirit to kill the enemy. Of course, the battle between cultivators was much more dangerous than going to the battlefield to kill the enemy. If they were not careful, their souls would be destroyed, and they would not even have the chance to reincarnate. They would completely disappear from the world. After seeing that all the disciples had arrived, Dan Chunzi took out a scroll from his sleeve and spread it out. The power sealed in the scroll was immediately activated, and a misty green light enveloped Ji Yufei and the others. Ji Yufei only felt his body tighten, and a strange force seemed to bind him. Then, he saw the scene in front of him begin to blur. A green light not only wrapped around Ji Yufei and the other disciples, but also enveloped Dan Chunzi. In an instant, the space that was enveloped by the green light seemed to suddenly collapse. There was a tremor, and then there was a flash of light. Dan Chunzi, Ji Yufei, and the others disappeared from the courtyard. After a while, swoosh, a green-clothed old man appeared in the courtyard. He sized up the surroundings and muttered, "They're finally gone." This old man seemed to heave a sigh of relief. This old man was precisely the mysterious expert of the Canopy Lunar Pavilion that had obstructed the battle between the Azure Dragon and Ji Fei that night. The Canopy Lunar Pavilion didn't seem to be as simple as an inn. Ji Fei seemed as if he was riding on the clouds and mist, unable to go up to the sky or down to the ground. It was as if he was passing through space with everyone else. Besides an expanse of green light, it was an expanse of mistiness, and he was unable to see anything clearly. Even time seemed to have stopped, and Ji Fei was even unable to feel the passage of time. This feeling caused Ji Fei's heart to feel stuffy, and his head seemed to be slightly dizzy. After an unknown amount of time, it seemed to be an instant, yet it also seemed to be very long. Ji Fei suddenly felt his body loosen up, and the strange force that bound him had vanished. It vanished so abruptly, and Ji Fei was completely not mentally prepared for it. When their feet landed on the ground, the green light dissipated, and everyone seemed to have walked out from space. They looked around blankly, and the surrounding scenery started to gradually become clear from blurry. The Tao art of spatial teleportation was sealed within that scroll. Ji Fei felt that they'd arrived within a small valley, and before them, which was also the center of the small valley, was a tall sacrificial altar. A white jade staircase hung down from the sacrificial altar. This is. When he sensed the energy contained within the sacrificial altar, Ji Fei's expression couldn't help but change. The sacrificial altar drew in the vital energy from the surroundings, and it was like an enormous primeval beast that was lying in ambush before him. This energy was boundlessly vast, and it caused Ji Fei to feel boundless pressure. If this energy were to explode, even Ji Fei didn't dare imagine what the consequences would be. Ji Fei suddenly felt that there seemed to be figures flashing above the sacrificial altar. Let's go. Follow me up. The people from the Guangqing Celestial Sect and the High Clarity Sect have arrived long ago. Dan Chunzi flicked his sleeve and took the lead to walk towards the sacrificial altar. Ji Fei, Li Lingfeng, and the others hurriedly followed. It was very strange. When Ji Fei stepped onto the white jade staircase hanging down from the sacrificial altar, the pressure in his heart actually disappeared. When he stepped onto the sacrificial altar, Ji Fei felt that there were actually over 20 people gathered on the sacrificial altar. He saw familiar figures: Guangqing's junior sister Li Mengyao, High Clarity Sect's Lin Xian, Yi Chen, and the others were all among them. However, no one spoke. Everyone had a solemn expression, and there were even people who raised their heads to look at the sky from time to time. Ji Fei couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. The sky seemed to be. Ji Fei felt that the sky above the sacrificial altar was a vast expanse of whiteness, as if there was an endless sea of clouds that covered the entire sky. Boom! Right at this moment, a sudden loud sound came from the sky. In an instant, the entire mountain valley shook, and the huge rocks on the surrounding mountains rumbled and rolled down. Only the enormous sacrificial altar was as steady as Mount Tai. Chapter 154. Boom! An earth-shattering boom resounded, shaking heaven and earth. An endless cage of darkness instantly covered the entire valley. A layer of light curtain suddenly appeared above the altar, like a light shield covering the entire altar. Demonic chi surged in from all directions, but it was blocked by the light, unable to take even half a step forward. Roar! This tortoise shell is really hard. Furious roars echoed in the air, and a series of earth-shattering booms rang out. It was as if an ancient giant was fiercely pounding on the light curtain with his fists, and the momentum was extremely fierce. Ji Fei and the others couldn't help but be shocked. Outside the light barrier, the mountains were collapsing, the ground was cracking, and the world was shaking. The entire valley had been completely destroyed. Daoist Chao Yang, who was in charge of the formation in the center of the altar, was still sitting cross-legged with a calm expression. At this time, the large formation on the altar began to emit a misty light. The runes seemed to come to life and wandered around. Although the light was flashing from the impact of the demonic chi, mysterious light runes were circulating on the light barrier, dissolving all the attacks into nothingness. The altar beneath everyone's feet had absorbed an endless amount of worldly essence. After the large formation was activated, the altar became a world of its own. No matter how the demon outside attacked, It was unable to shake it in the slightest. What's going on? Li Lingfeng whispered to Ren Wuming of the Guangcheng celestial sect. Our whereabouts seem to have been discovered by the demons, Ren Wuming said with a serious expression. The demons know? The disciples of the Supreme Mystery Sect couldn't help but be shocked. No wonder their Uncle Master Dan Chunzi had urgently summoned them here. Daoist 6, what are you waiting for? Suddenly, a loud shout came from outside. The rolling sound waves shook the mountains. Even with the barrier of the formation, the disciples of the three great Daoist sects on the altar felt their ears ringing. Everyone's expressions changed as they were shocked. Dan Chunzi, Liu Ruhai, and Ding Yangzi couldn't help but look at each other. They all saw a trace of shock in each other's eyes. Then, they all looked at Daoist Chao Yang, who was sitting cross-legged in the center of the altar. They couldn't maintain their calm. Great Devil Sovereign, are you ordering me around? Another loud voice rang out. That person seemed to be a bit angry. As soon as he finished speaking, a 10,000 zhong long beam of blood-red light cleaved down from the sky, instantly tearing the world in half. The boundless baleful aura caused the hearts of all living beings to palpitate. That 3,000-meter-long blood-colored saber light sent out tens of thousands of blood waves. There seemed to be countless demons roaring within the bloodlight, their demonic voices shaking the world. The moment the demonic saber appeared, the wind and clouds changed color. In an instant, the demonic saber radiance seemed to suck in all the heaven and earth spiritual chi within a radius of 1,000 miles. The energy shield that enveloped the altar dimmed a little. Boom! A loud sound shook the heavens and the earth. The blood-red demonic saber fiercely chopped down on the light curtain. The demonic saber light actually chopped into the light curtain. However, it only managed to break a 2 to 3 feet gap. Hiss! The crowd couldn't help but gasp. The blood-red demonic saber hovered above their heads. The demonic chi was vast and mighty. Everyone immediately felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Their bodies couldn't help but tremble and their faces turned pale. At that moment, Daoist Chao Yang, who was sitting cross-legged in the center of the altar, opened his eyes. 2 rays of fiery light shot out from his eye sockets, each several feet long. He stood up and his body was surrounded by rays of fiery light. At that moment, the 9 suns' brilliant sky-burning golden crow robe emitted layers of fiery light. Ah! Even the Sky Devil Saber can't break this tortoise shell. Damn it! A loud voice resounded in the sky. The clouds drifting in the sky were shaken and dispersed. The 10,000 zhong long blood-red demonic saber trembled continuously, emitting endless ferocious might. It pressed down continuously, but it couldn't move an inch forward, as if it was stuck on the light curtain. Daoist Chao Yang raised his head with a cold gaze. The 9 three-legged golden crows on the golden crow robe emitted endless fiery chi, as if they were about to burst out from the robe. He raised his right hand and pressed it upwards. The blood-red demonic saber was instantly knocked away. Above the rolling demonic clouds, a 10,000 zhong long demonic figure let out a fierce roar and flew back into the demonic clouds. The light curtain in the sky immediately returned to its original state. The demonic chi was immediately blocked outside the light curtain, unable to penetrate it even a little bit. Ji Yufei and the others immediately heaved a sigh of relief. The devilish aura was truly unbearable, and it caused everyone's soul to tremble and shake. It was as if there were countless demons and ghosts lingering around them. 6 Dao, the Sky Devil Saber in your hands is a complete waste of a heavenly treasure. In the west, another 10,000 zhong long demonic figure appeared. The blurry demonic figure seemed illusory, giving off an unreal feeling. However, it emitted a great pressure that enveloped the surroundings. A cold harumph drifted from the north. Closely after that, a ferocious demonic figure strode out of the rolling demonic clouds with a 10,000 zhong long demonic saber in hand. The 2 demons revealed their celestial and demonic images. In a split second, the sky and the earth became dim. As a result, the area within 60 square miles became a terrifying and gloomy demonic domain. Demon Monarch of 6 Dao, Great Demon Hermit, you 2 demons, if you're sensible, hurry up and leave. Otherwise, this place will be your burial place. Standing in the center of the sacrificial altar, Daoist Chao Yang roared as he watched the two 10,000 Zhonglong demonic figures in the sky. Chao Yang, kiddo, don't brag. When this father was unrivaled in the heavens and earth, you were still wearing diapers. Show me what you've got. The demonic figure in the west roared as tens of thousands of demonic clouds were surging behind him. Such a great noise had long aroused the attention of Dragon Emperor City over 60 miles away. The terrifying demonic chi had even spread to Dragon Emperor City. Commoners might not feel anything abnormal, however, the cultivators in Dragon Emperor City were amazed. None of the top cultivators in Dragon Emperor City launched an attack. Instead, they were just observing. The two demons rarely left the demonic domain. It was rare for them to appear at the same time. In a split second, all the people in Dragon Emperor City were flurried as they thought that the army of the demonic domain was approaching their territory. Only those old monsters knew that the two demons didn't come here to occupy Dragon Emperor City. Because Dragon Emperor City was not simple and had many secrets, which made the demons scruple. In the south, a ball of flame was hidden in the clouds. Faintly, there seemed to be a shadow of a phoenix. In other directions, there were also obscure waves. Some powerful figures were observing. Fine, I will kill the demons and defend the Tao today, Daoist Chao Yang said solemnly. Closely after that, he started to make mysterious hand seals one after another, releasing a surging magical power wave like ocean waves. Rumble. The sacrificial altar quivered for a short while. At once, all the people quivered and couldn't stand steadily. All of them revealed an amazed and dumbfounded look. The altar beneath everyone's feet began to emit an immense pressure. This pressure was even more vast and powerful than the demonic might emitted by the two gigantic demonic figures in the sky. Runes began to appear around the altar, and the altar began to shine with a dazzling light. It was as if a primordial beast had been awakened. Apart from the people on the altar, everyone else felt an incomparable pressure. Under the shocked gaze of the others, the huge sacrificial altar started to slowly rise into the sky like a far ancient immortal mountain, directly driving away the demonic clouds in the sky. The 2,000s of high demonic shadows flew backward. That sacrificial altar we seem to have miscalculated it. A voice drifted from Dragon Emperor City. Some old monsters were thinking about the sacrificial altar. Rumble. The heavens and the earth were shaking. The boundless power shook the heavens and the earth. The mountains were shaking and the earth was cracking, as if doomsday had arrived. The huge sacrificial altar had absorbed a great deal of the essence of the heavens and the earth. At this moment, it was guided out by Daoist Chao Yang. The power was so great that even a demigod would be shocked. At this moment, the first demon venerable and demon monarch of 6 paths, who were hiding in the thousands of high demonic shadows, sensed that Daoist Chao Yang could really manipulate the power of the sacrificial altar. In this way, Daoist Chao Yang could really kill them. Both the first demon venerable and demon monarch of 6 paths sensed the danger. Roar. Demon monarch of 6 paths roared furiously. The thousands of high demonic shadow released endless demonic power, and its ferocious chi filled the heavens and the earth. He raised the thousands of high blood-red demonic saber with both hands and slashed at the sacrificial altar that was rising into the sky. The blood-red saber light tore the heavens and the earth apart. It sounded like thousands of demons were roaring and shouting. The demonic sound directly penetrated the body and affected the soul. Within a radius of 100 miles, all living creatures were penetrated by the demonic sound. They were instantly killed. The power of the soul turned into specks of light and was absorbed by the blood-red saber light, becoming the nourishment of the demonic saber. When the sky demon saber was drawn, blood was killed within 100 miles, and all living creatures were slaughtered. Even with the protection of the array, Jiu Fei and the others felt that their souls were shaking, as if their souls were going to rush out of their bodies. They hurried to operate their cultivation to resist the demonic sound. Boom! With a loud noise, the sky demon saber, worthy of being called the #1 demonic saber of the demonic path, directly broke through the layers of runes and slashed at the light curtain formed by the power of the sacrificial altar. However, this time, the demonic saber couldn't break the light curtain with one slash. The thousands of high blade light only hit the light curtain, and the sacrificial altar trembled. The next moment, the blood-red demonic saber was directly knocked away by an extremely powerful force. Kill. Daoist Chao Yang controlled the array on the sacrificial altar. With a wave of his hand, he seemed to attract an infinite power, which directly tore the void apart and attacked the retreating demon monarch of Six Paths Raw. Demon monarch of Six Paths was shocked, and he hurriedly slashed at the surging destructive power. Boom! The saber light was broken, and the thousands of high demonic shadow disappeared. Boom! The saber light was broken again, and the demonic blood splashed in the sky. Boom! Without any suspense, the saber light was broken, and the demonic clouds in the sky were shaken away. The sky and the earth were lit up, and the demon monarch of Six Paths fell directly from the sky. Everyone was shocked that Daoist Chao Yang's attack had directly knocked the demon monarch of Six Paths down from the sky. Chapter 155. Daoist Chao Yang combined with the altar to control the formation. He displayed great magical power and struck the demonic monarch of Six Paths with his palm. For a moment, no one dared to look at him. He's invincible. No one in the royal emptiness realm is his match, unless a demigod appears, someone said. Some people who wanted to attack also gave up on the idea. Many old monsters in the southern wasteland knew about the existence of the altar, but they thought it was just a transmitting formation built by Taoism. No one could have imagined that the altar was a great weapon. Rumble. The massive four-sided sacrificial altar slowly rose up, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. The boundless pressure it emitted was like a mountain, causing people to have the urge to look up at it, feeling as if they were as small as ants in front of it. On the altar, outside of the formation, Ji Yufei and the others were shocked. All of this was beyond their understanding. The 30 most outstanding young disciples of Taoism and the 3 senior experts of Taoism were all shocked. No one made a sound. The altar was deathly silent, terrifyingly silent. Roar. A furious roar came from the ground. Then, a mass of pitch-black demonic aura rose from the ground and flew to the west without looking back. It was the demonic monarch of Six Paths. Although Daoist Chao Yang's attack had smashed the demonic monarch of Six Paths down from the sky, it did not kill him. However, the demonic monarch of Six Paths had also suffered a great impact. He did not dare to stay any longer. Seeing that the situation was not good, he immediately fled. The demonic monarch of Six Paths knew that there were many old monsters in the royal emptiness realm watching him. If someone attacked him while he was seriously injured, he would be in danger of dying in the southern wasteland. Was there really no one who wanted to attack the demonic monarch of Six Paths? The answer was no. Just as the Six Paths Demon King was about to leave, a phoenix cry came from the south. Then, a giant phoenix flew out of the clouds. It was surrounded by divine flames, and it flapped its wings and chased after the Demon King of Six Paths, a vermilion bird and fire phoenix. Some old monsters in the royal emptiness realm who were hiding nearby changed their expressions when they saw the fire phoenix surrounded by divine flames. Rumor had it that the cultivation forces that had been passed down for countless years all had a great feud with the demons. It seemed that the rumor was not groundless. Without a doubt, that fire phoenix was not the real vermilion bird divine beast, but a vermilion bird expert of the Imperial Void stage that had transformed into the form of a fire phoenix. A pitch-black demonic shadow and a huge fire phoenix streaked across the sky like 2 bolts of lightning, disappearing into the western horizon in the blink of an eye. Great Demon Venerable, it's your turn. Taoist Chao Yang controlled the altar, which was already high in the sky. As he spoke, he activated the power of the altar, condensing a flaming godly hand, which grabbed at the rolling demonic clouds. The huge flaming hand broke a hole in the surging demonic clouds that covered half the sky, and a demonic figure emerged from the demonic clouds. The demon realm's great demon sovereign had revealed his true appearance. The great demon sovereign was 5 meters tall. His entire body looked like it was made of steel. He gave off an extremely powerful feeling. His blood-red eyes flickered with an evil light. The armor on his body flickered with black light, exuding a great murderous aura, which made people feel that he was powerful and terrifying. The flaming godly hand turned into a huge mountain in the blink of an eye, shaking the heaven and earth. The 5 fingers were like pillars of fire, covering the sky and covering the earth, shrouding the great demon sovereign. Roar. The great demon sovereign let out a crazy roar. 2 demonic lights shot out from his blood-red eyes. Demonic energy surged all over his body, and black light appeared around him. Endless demonic energy instantly submerged the great demon sovereign. Then, the surging demonic clouds condensed into a huge pitch-black demonic hand to meet the flaming godly hand. Boom! The pitch-black demonic hand and the flaming godly hand collided fiercely. The surging power shook the heaven and earth. The demonic hand directly collapsed, and the great demon sovereign was directly thrown down. Demonic blood sprinkled down. Rumble. The earth trembled, and endless demonic energy entered the ground. The great demon sovereign didn't dare to fight anymore, so he directly escaped from the ground. This kind of demon had cultivated the immortal true demon body, so it was very difficult to kill him. However, some people still chased after him. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The demon monarch of 6 paths and the great demon sovereign were both seriously injured, so it was not impossible to kill them at this time. Taoist Zhaoyang glanced around, then directly sat cross-legged on the formation eye of the altar and began to pinch the Tao formula. Ji Yufei and the others saw the scene just now, and their minds were shaken, unable to calm down for a long time. The tall figure of Taoist Chao Yang was deeply engraved in their hearts. He disdainfully looked down on all the heroes, beat up the 2 great demons of the demon area, and shocked all the strong cultivators, so no one dared to come out to fight him. How majestic and heroic was this? Not knowing how the others felt, Ji Yufei was deeply shaken, and his heart of cultivation became even more determined. If he could become a supremacy and defeat all the strong cultivators in the world, it would not be a waste of his time in this world. Taoist Chao Yang, who was sitting cross-legged in the center of the formation, suddenly said, "It's time. Drop your blood essence, and I will send you over." At this time, the formation on the altar was already shining brightly, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered from all directions and merged into the formation. In addition, the altar had also absorbed an endless amount of spiritual chi of heaven and earth. For a moment, the entire altar exuded an unprecedentedly powerful aura. The void around the altar was distorted, and then tiny spatial cracks that were as thin as strands of hair appeared. The power condensed by the altar had definitely surpassed the demigod level. Hearing this, everyone walked into the formation under the direction of Dan Chunzi, Liu Ruhai, and Ding Yangzi. Then, they bit their fingers and dropped a drop of blood essence on the formation under their feet. The moment the drop of blood fell on the formation, a red light burst out and was directly absorbed by the formation. Then, faintly, Ji Yufei seemed to feel as if he had become one with the formation. Swoosh! With a sound, it was as if heaven and earth had changed places, or as if they had passed through an endless world of nothingness. Ji Yufei only felt his vision blur, then darkness, and then light again. He felt that he was still standing on the altar. Looking around, Li Lingfeng, Ziyu, and the others were also beside him, looking around blankly. There was also a formation under his feet. The light of the formation was receding like a tide, and finally disappeared into the altar. There was also a person sitting cross-legged in the center of the formation. However, Ji Yufei felt that the Taoist sitting in the formation was not the Shaoyang Peak's Taoist Chao Yang, but a middle-aged Taoist with a pale face and wearing a simple white Taoist robe. What's going on? Ji Yufei could not help but be shocked. He then looked around and felt that the altar seemed to be surrounded by a valley. It should be called a gorge, and the altar was at the bottom of a cliff next to the gorge. Ji Yufei found that this altar seemed to be no different from the original altar. However, Ji Yufei knew that this altar was not the one controlled by Taoist Chao Yang. In just an instant, everyone arrived at an unknown place. It was really too magical. It was even faster than teleportation using Space Dao scrolls. Greetings, Senior Li Shong. Greetings, Patriarch Li Shong. Dan Chunzi and Ding Yangzi bowed to the middle-aged Daoist who was sitting cross-legged at the center of the altar. Liu Ruhai led a group of Guangqing Immortal Sect disciples and bowed to the middle-aged Daoist. The middle-aged Taoist seemed to be very young, but his background seemed to be very powerful. The middle-aged Taoist who was sitting cross-legged in the core of the altar slowly opened his eyes. He first glanced at the 30 disciples of the younger generation around him. When his gaze landed on Jiu Fei, he seemed to be a little surprised. Then, his gaze fell on Dan Chunzi and the others. "Get up." The middle-aged Taoist Li Shong gently waved his sleeve. The Guangcheng Celestial Sect disciples who were bowing on the ground immediately felt a gentle force lifting them up. The middle-aged Taoist Li Shong stood up and said calmly, "It's been 260 years. I didn't expect that I, Li Shong, had been guarding this place for 260 years. The middle-aged Taoist Li Shong seemed to be a little disappointed. In the middle of the gorge, apart from the altar at the bottom of the cliff, there were many pavilions and terraces. At this moment, streaks of light flew out from the pavilions in the distance, heading towards the altar. Soon, 9 Taoists in green clothes landed on the altar on their Dharma treasures. "Greetings, Patriarch." A black-bearded Taoist respectfully bowed to Taoist Li Shong. Taoist Li Shong nodded and said to Dan Chunzi and the others, "All right, you have arrived at the important place of the 3 great Taoist sects in the 100,000 mountain range, the sky-splitting valley." Taoist Li Shong paused for a moment before saying, "Qingfeng, bring them to the 3 origin hall to rest." "Yes." The black-bearded Taoist quickly responded. Taoist Li Shong's words caused a commotion among the younger generation of the 3 great Taoist sects, including Jiu Fei. They had actually entered the 100,000 mountain range. At this moment, everyone finally realized that their sects were so generous that they could build 2 altars that could teleport people thousands of miles away. No wonder no one had found the sky-splitting valley or the ruined sky realm in the past thousands of years. Teleportation through the void was traceless. Even void-controlling stage cultivators would have a hard time tracking the trajectory of the void teleportation. Unless an immortal-level peerless figure made a move. However, immortal-level figures had long since shattered the void and entered the legendary heaven realm. No one would stay in the mortal world. Immortal-level experts were already the top figures in the world. Anyone who entered the sacred realm was already invincible in the world. Only by entering the legendary heaven realm could one achieve glory again. Under the lead of the black-bearded Taoist Qingfeng and the other 8 Taoists in green clothes, everyone walked down the altar and headed toward the palace in the distance. Chapter 156. The sky-splitting valley was a narrow gorge that was thousands of miles long. The gorge was in a straight line somewhere in the 100,000 mountain range. Network, it was as if someone had used a peerless divine weapon to open up a crack between the heavens and the earth in the mountains. No one knew how the founding ancestors of the 3 great Tao sects found their way here in the past. They actually found a mysterious place in the sky-splitting valley. The sky-splitting valley was an important place for the 3 great Tao sects. It could be said that the founding ancestors of the 3 great Tao sects started their journey here. They had a fortuitous encounter and started their own sects. Therefore, this gorge could be said to be the origin of the 3 great Tao sects. The achievements of the 3 great Tao sects were inextricably linked to this important place. The 100,000 mountain range was a taboo. There were all kinds of legends and secrets in the mountain range. In the 100,000 mountain range, there was a dangerous place that even immortals did not dare to step into. There was a desperate situation that could send a demigod to his grave in an instant. Legend had it that in the depths of the 100,000 mountain range, there was a battlefield of gods and demons. There was a place where the dragon burial ground and there were miracles left behind from ancient times. The 100,000 mountain range was one of the most mysterious places in the Tenglong continent. There was nothing that was impossible in this place. The sky-splitting valley was not in the depths of the mountain range. At most, it was at the edge of the mountain range. However, even so, no outsider had been able to enter this place for thousands of years. The sky was filled with stars, sprinkling down endless starlight. The bright moon shone high up in the sky. The world was silent. At the end of the sky-splitting valley, the gorge stopped abruptly. It was as if the crack of the gorge had suddenly stopped here. It was as if the peerless strike of a god was blocked by someone, or perhaps it had struck a mysterious place. In short, the 1,000-mile gorge came to an abrupt end. At the end of the gorge was a huge, smooth, jade-like rock wall. On the rock wall, there was a stone door. The stone door was tightly shut. The surrounding dust was a few inches thick. There was no wind here. Everything seemed to be still, as if even the wind was unwilling to step into this place. There was no doubt that this stone door had not been opened for a very long time. The stone door was very ordinary and there was nothing special about it. If there was anything special, it would be that this stone door was embedded into the stone wall. It was as if there was another world behind the stone wall. This stone door had undoubtedly existed for countless years, because it gave off an aura of infinite antiquity. About 10 miles away from the stone gate, in a vast valley, there was a palace. Under the cover of the night, only that palace gave off a bit of light. Crack Valley, 3 Yuan Palace. Dozens of white figures were sitting cross-legged in the main hall. Some of them had a small sword embroidered on their sleeves, some had a talisman on their sleeves, and some had nothing. Those who had small swords embroidered on their sleeves were disciples of the Guangcheng celestial sect. Those who had runes embroidered on their sleeves were disciples of the Shangqing sect. Those who had nothing on their sleeves were disciples of the Taishan sect. 30 of the most outstanding disciples of the younger generation from the 3 great Daoist societies sat cross-legged on the ground, their eyes closed as they circulated their qi. Wisps of magical power emanated from these people and lingered in the main hall. These people were the elites of the younger generation from the 3 great Daoist societies. They were the most outstanding disciples who had stood out from their peers through selection. It could be said that they were the future of the 3 great Daoist societies. The main hall was very quiet. No one spoke, and even the faint sound of breathing could be heard. They were making the final preparations to enter the ruined sky realm. There were still 7 or 8 days until the demon star rushed to the 7 fiends. However, in these few days, the people from the 3 great Daoist societies had already begun to attack the seal. However, they had all failed. The seal of the stone door was extremely powerful, and no power could shake it. Even after using the power of the altar, they still could not get close to the stone door. Their plan to open the ruined sky realm ahead of time could be considered to have failed. The 3 great Daoist societies had once again confirmed the last words of their founding ancestor. No matter how powerful one's magical power was, one could not open the ruined sky realm until the time was right. Only when the demon star rushed to the 7 fiends and the fiends and demons wreaked havoc in heaven and earth would the balance of the power of heaven and earth be disrupted, and the power of the seal would be greatly weakened. Only then could the ruined sky realm be opened. Among the 30 white-robed young disciples sitting cross-legged in the main hall, one of them suddenly stood up from the ground. That person was none other than Ji Yu Fei. His Tao was operating at all times, and it was suitable for both movement and stillness. He did not need to sit around all day, comprehend the heavenly Tao, and condense magical power like other cultivators. To Ji Yu Fei, stillness was the Tao, and stillness was also the Tao. Stillness and stillness were both Tao. Ji Yu Fei did not alarm anyone. He walked out of the 3 Essences hall. The moment he stepped out of the hall, at least 7 or 8 divine senses swept over him at the same time. Ji Yu Fei could not help but frown. He had long known that the disciples of the 3 great Daoist societies guarding the Split Sky Valley were all cultivators in the transcending mortality realm. Cultivators in the transcending mortality realm had already condensed their Tao core and entered the cultivation stage of nurturing their nascent divinities. At this stage, the divine senses of cultivators were very powerful. They could instantly sense the slightest movement in the wind, and it was clearer and more real than seeing with their eyes. This might be the legendary heavenly eye. Ji Yu Fei could not be bothered with them. He calmly walked to a pavilion beside the main hall. There was a simple stone table and a few stone stools in the pavilion. When Ji Yu Fei walked into the pavilion, the 7 or 8 divine senses also retreated. Ji Yu Fei leaned against the railing and looked around. The moonlight was like water, and it was quiet everywhere. Looking up at the sky, he saw a blood-red demon star and a dark green demon star flickering with demonic light, as if they were competing to see who was brighter. The distance between the 2 stars is getting closer. Could it be that the stars in the sky can really collide? Ji Fei thought of the prophecy that happened once every 260 years and could not help but have some doubts in his heart. The two demonic stars in the sky were much brighter than the other stars. They seemed to be closer to the ground than all the other stars, as if they could fall from the sky at any time. Ji Fei stared at the blood-red devilish star. In a trance, the devilish star seemed to have transformed into an extremely hideous and enormous devilish face that swooped down from the sky. Its bloody mouth was wide open, and countless living beings were swallowed into that bloody mouth. Ji Fei felt as if his soul was about to be sucked away. At this moment, the Tai Chi mark on Ji Fei's chest flashed with a ray of light, and a cool stream of air flowed into Ji Fei's body. Ji Fei's body shook, and he suddenly woke up. So evil. Ji Fei's heart trembled, and he quickly looked away. At this time, he realized that his clothes had long been soaked in sweat. Ji Fei felt a little upset. It seemed that the demon star in the sky had affected his state of mind. Ji Fei did not think too much about it. He directly sat down in the pavilion and used his Shen Qi to gradually calm his upset thoughts. Everything in the pavilion was seen by an old Taoist with white beard and eyebrows who was sitting on the roof of another hall in the distance. Under the moonlight, the right side of the old Taoist's face was as red as a baby's, but the left side of his face was wrinkled like a dried orange peel. At first glance, it was simply half a skull. The right side of the old Taoist's body was full of vitality, but the left side was lifeless. Life and death, two completely opposite auras, actually appeared on the body of a person. Anyone who saw it would be shocked. However, Ji Fei could not detect the old Taoist's existence, and the old Taoist's gaze seemed to pierce through the void and fell on Ji Fei. Strange, this child actually does not practice Taoist techniques, it seems, it is the long-lost martial arts. Interesting. The old Taoist seemed to be very interested in Ji Fei. The old Taoist's cloudy eyes flashed a bit, as if he had discovered something interesting. However, the old Taoist quickly retracted his gaze, and then closed his eyes gently, like a fossil, sitting on the roof of the hall. The sun rose in the east, and Ji Fei woke up from his meditation. Unknowingly, a night had passed, and Ji Fei's annoyance had long since calmed down. However, it had to be said that the devil star in the sky was really full of demonic nature. Ji Fei only took a look at it, and his inner demons were almost triggered by the demonic nature of the devil star. It should be known that Ji Fei walked the path of martial arts, and martial arts was the human path. It did not leave the body, and it did not refine the primordial spirit. It focused on one's heart, and there was nothing else. It was what one's heart was. Regardless of the surging mortal world and the boundless mortal world, one would bravely advance and strive to be the most supreme in the world. Therefore, with Ji Fei's state of mind, it was absolutely impossible for an inner demon to appear during cultivation. Even Ji Fei almost lost his mind, which was enough to show how evil the devil star was. In the next 2 days, Ji Fei did not take a step out of the Hall of Three Elements. He stayed in his room, and when he was bored, he would open the magical equipment bag and look at the Xiaoqing snake. This little guy had swallowed 2 beast crystals in succession, and even the demon core of the Blackwater mystical snake into its stomach. It seemed to be a little weak, and its abdomen was still swollen, and it did not seem to be shrinking. The Xiaoqing snake seemed to be a special species of snake. Ji Fei faintly felt that this little guy might have a powerful background. Seeing that the Xiaoqing snake was listlessly coiled in the magical equipment bag, Ji Fei did not disturb it, and let it refine the demon core. However, the demon core of the Blackwater mystical snake was not easy to refine, and it might take some time. On the morning of the 8th day, all the disciples of the 3 major Taoist sects in the Crack Valley gathered in the Hall of Three Elements. Everyone looked extremely serious. An important moment is coming. Check everything around you. Don't leave behind anything that you should bring, and throw away anything that you shouldn't bring. Then, follow your master out. Daoist Li Shong looked at the disciples in front of him and said in a deep voice. Behind Taoist Li Shong stood 2 old Taoists. These 2 old Taoists were definitely 2 old monsters, which could be seen from their appearance. The 2 old Taoists were as thin as sticks, and a few strands of hair on their heads were almost gone. Their skin was wrinkled, and it was impossible to tell how old they were. They looked like dried corpses. Chapter 157. The morning sun was like fire, illuminating the earth and dispelling the darkness. At the end of the cracked sky valley, a group of white-robed youths sat cross-legged in an open space in front of the stone wall. There were also 2 or 3 young girls among them. The 30 most outstanding disciples of the younger generation of the 3 great Daoist sects were gathered here. There was a stone door on the stone wall. The stone door was tightly shut, and an aura of immeasurable antiquity assaulted one's senses. 2 old Taoists sat cross-legged in front of the stone door. Both of them had lived for an unknown period of time. Their skin was wrinkled, and their faces were filled with wrinkles that looked like ravines carved into their faces. The old Taoists, who were as thin as mummies, had lived for a long time. Therefore, in terms of seniority, they were definitely the oldest of the 3 great Daoist sects. It was these 2 antique old Taoists who were in charge of opening the ruined sky realm. Ji Yufei sat cross-legged behind Li Lingfeng. He stared at the simple stone door on the stone wall in front of him. Could it be that one could enter the legendary ruined sky grotto heaven through this stone door? The stone door on the stone wall was clearly connected to a certain place. There was no doubt about it. However, whether it was the most mysterious ruined sky realm of the 3 great Daoist sects, no one knew. Even if someone knew, they would definitely not say it. This was because it was a secret shared by the 3 great Daoist sects, and a great secret at that. No one dared to divulge this secret. In the eyes of the 3 great Daoist sects, the consequences of divulging this secret were even more serious than deceiving their masters and destroying their ancestors. Apart from the 30 most outstanding young disciples of the 3 great Daoist sects, Dan Chunzi, Liu Ruhai, and Ding Yangzi, there were also over 100 green-robed disciples at the transcending mortality stage guarding the surroundings. Everyone was on guard as if they were facing a great enemy. Daoist Li Shong had already left. He was preparing to move the altar and attack the seal. Only an altar that had gathered an endless amount of heaven and earth origin chi could shake the seal of the stone door. The 2 old Taoists, who were as thin as sticks, sat cross-legged in front of Dan Chunzi, Liu Ruhai, and the group of young disciples. Their brows were lowered, and their lips were moving slightly as if they were praying. However, no sound came out. Even though the sun had already risen high in the sky and the thousands of stars had long since faded away, there were still 2 stars that shone brilliantly in the sky and refused to fade away. Even in broad daylight, one could see the stars in the sky. This was a rare phenomenon that would only appear once every 260 years. The devils and demons of the world began to walk out of their secluded cultivation grounds to welcome the arrival of the Holy Sun. Today, there would definitely be a battle between the devils and demons. After all, they were mortal enemies. Legend has it that the devil star in the sky was formed by the devil king that was exiled to the 9 heavens. The devil king's name was Heavenly Devil. Every 260 years, he would return. However, he was obstructed by an ancient demon lord called 7 Fiends. This was the origin of the devil star strikes the 7 Fiends. Of course, this was only a legend. The devil star formed by the heavenly demon and the demon star formed by the ancient demon lord would collide once every 260-year cycles. For millions of years, it had never stopped, and the mighty energy of heaven and earth would also be disturbed at this time. Tonight was the time when the devil star rushed towards the 7 evils. Cultivators who had opened their heavenly eyes could already see the devil star returning from the 9 heavens and falling to the earth. However, the 7 Fiends demon star was meeting the devil star and blocking its way back. Although it was daytime, and the sun star was emitting endless yang qi, those powerful cultivators could already sense that the mighty energy of heaven and earth seemed to be somewhat unstable. The devil and demon powers were gradually affecting the balance of the mighty energy of heaven and earth. However, all this had nothing to do with Ji Yufei. What he needed to do now was to wait for the night to come, and then enter the secret realm of the ruined sky to search for the 9-colored divine grass. No one knew what the 9-colored divine grass was, but every disciple of the Taishan sect had a jade slip in their hands. In the jade slip, apart from the map of the ruined sky realm, it also contained a description of the 9-colored divine grass. Ji Yufei felt that the map in the jade slip was incomplete. It did not show the whole ruined sky realm, and seemed to only show a very small area. In other words, it had been thousands of years since the founder of the Taishen sect appeared in the ruined sky realm, and the three great Daoist sects had yet to explore the entire ruined sky realm. This was enough to show that the so-called ruined sky realm was so vast that even now, it was still unclear how big it was. It was full of unknown dangers. The ruined sky realm was not a paradise, nor was it a fairyland. Some areas could even be said to be dangerous places. This was the precious experience accumulated by the disciples who had entered the ruined sky realm. The unknown dangers in the ruined sky realm were enough to be fatal. Danger and opportunity coexisted. Although there was the danger of dying, as long as one could come out of the ruined sky realm, one would be able to make some progress in cultivation. Some of the disciples of the three great Daoist sects who came out of the ruined sky realm later became experts in the cultivation world of the Tenglong continent. Dozens of people sat cross-legged in front of the stone wall. From morning to noon, and from noon to night, no one spoke, and no one even moved. However, Jiyu Fei found that as time passed, the breathing of the surrounding disciples in the transcending mortality realm gradually began to quicken. Those disciples in green seemed to be very excited. It was so quiet that it made one's heart palpitate and chest feel suffocated. In front of the stone wall, a tense atmosphere pervaded the air, and everyone's nerves were stretched taut. Rumble. A muffled thunder-like sound began to come out of the split sky valley. In this quiet night, it clearly reached the ears of everyone in front of the stone wall. The two thin old Taoists sitting in front of the stone wall suddenly opened their eyes. Their eyes were no longer cloudy, but were as bright as stars. "It's finally starting," the two old Taoists murmured in a very low voice, so low that even they themselves seemed to be unable to hear it. An extremely ugly smile appeared on their wrinkled faces. Although it was not the first time these two old Taoists had presided over the opening of the ruined sky realm, they could not help but be very excited when it was really about to open. This sound. As the sound entered his ears, Jiyu Fei could not help but frown. He had vaguely guessed where the muffled thunder-like sound came from. Sure enough, after the sound came out, the surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth boiled, and then converged behind. For a moment, the weather changed. At some point, the bright moon that was originally hanging in the sky had disappeared, and the countless stars in the sky had also disappeared. In the entire sky, there were only two bright stars left. One of the stars was emitting endless blood-colored demonic light. What it sprinkled down was not starlight, but endless demonic nature that could arouse the deepest evil thoughts in everyone's heart. And the other star, although it looked very evil, emitting a dark green light that illuminated the heaven and earth, it was less evil and more righteous. Jiyu Fei was surprised to find that the two stars in the sky seemed to be approaching. This was not an illusion, but the demon star and the seven malefic demon star were really moving. There are still 2 hours until the Ion hour. Listen up, disciples. The two old Taoists sitting cross-legged in front of the crowd had already stood up. One of them who was speaking paused for a moment before continuing. "The ruined sky realm is not the paradise you think it is, but a dangerous place. You must be careful in there, or you won't even know what happened when you die." The other old Taoist continued, "If you encounter danger in there, no one will save you. You can only rely on yourself. Life and death are determined by fate. Do you understand?" Hearing that, Jiyu Fei did not say anything. The test of life and death was the best training for him. However, the others looked at each other, a little confused. Although they had heard bits and pieces about the ruined heaven realm from others, they still found it a little hard to adapt to the direct words of these two old seniors. After the two old Taoists said some things that they should pay attention to in the ruined sky realm, they did not speak anymore, but raised their heads to observe the two stars in the sky. At this time, the rumbling sound had gradually become like the galloping of 10,000 horses. The entire split sky valley was shaking slightly, as if there were really 10,000 horses galloping. Of course, everyone knew that there was absolutely no scene of 10,000 horses galloping in the vicinity of the split sky valley. Inside the split sky valley, thousands of spiritual qi gathered in one place, and a force began to awaken, as if a prehistoric beast had awakened from a deep sleep. This force caused Gu Fei's expression to change instantly, and the others reacted the same way as Gu Fei, because this force was very familiar. It was the energy fluctuation that burst out when Taoist Chao Yang activated the Grand Formation and controlled the altar. Needless to say, Taoist Li Shong was activating the Grand Formation and gradually guiding the power of the altar out. Rumble. The rumbling sound became louder and louder, and the ground of the split sky valley trembled. Ripples spread out from the canyon, and then the ripples slowly expanded, and eventually turned into monstrous waves. Boundless energy fluctuations were like monstrous waves, surging violently in the sky above the sky-splitting valley. At this moment, everyone was extremely nervous. The power of the sacrificial altar made everyone feel an immense pressure. Everyone present was shocked. Everyone stood up from the ground and looked towards the direction where the sound came from. They saw thousands of multicolored lights lingering in the air, and an altar was slowly rising from the canyon. At this time, the blood-red demon star in the sky and the Seven Fiends demon star were approaching each other at a speed visible to the naked eye. Half an hour had passed, and the altar was fixed in the sky, emitting thousands of multicolored lights and thousands of auspicious qi, illuminating the sky and earth. At the moment when the Z-hour arrived, the two approaching stars in the sky finally collided with each other. In an instant, time seemed to have stopped. Everyone who saw this scene temporarily lost their ability to think. At this moment, the power of the monsters and demons exploded. Even though they were far above the sky, the power of the monsters and demons still affected the Tenglong continent. At this moment, the demons were dancing wildly on the Tenglong continent. Under the influence of the power of the monsters and demons, the power of the monsters and demons skyrocketed. Wherever the monsters and demons met, there would be a great war. Chapter 158. The Devil's Star rushed towards the seven evils, and the sky seemed to be sprinkling endless blood and green light rain. The heaven and earth trembled, and the sky seemed to be overturned by the demonic power that exploded. Under this demonic phenomenon, millions of people were trembling in fear. At this moment, the balance of the power of the heaven and earth was finally shaken. Rumble. The altar that was originally fixed in the sky above the Crack Valley emitted thousands of rays of light, thousands of auspicious qi, and a vast and boundless pressure. It was like an ancient sacred mountain that was moving towards the stone wall. Back off, quickly back off. The two old Taoists shouted to the crowd of disciples excitedly, and they themselves were like rabbits that had their tails stepped on. Swoosh. They dodged to the side. All the disciples standing in front of the stone wall turned pale, and then they hurriedly dodged to the side. Swoosh. Gu Fei rushed out from below, and appeared on a big rock at the side of the cliff. He raised his head and looked at the huge altar that was moving towards him. His eyes had already narrowed into a line, and rays of light shot out from under his eyelids. What a terrifying altar. The person controlling the altar can definitely shake a demigod. Gu Fei was shocked. The pressure that the altar emitted was really too strong. Wherever the altar passed, the void would tremble, and thin space cracks would appear. Of course, in the dark night, under the illumination of thousands of rays of light, these thin space cracks that were as thin as silk could not be seen by many people. At this moment, the enormous four-sided altar seemed to have transformed into a piece of translucent and sparkling divine jade, flowing with dazzling divine light. Numerous mysterious talisman characters rushed out from the altar and circled around the altar endlessly. After countless years of gathering and absorbing, the altar contained endless essence of the heaven and earth. The ancient altar had condensed an unimaginably huge amount of energy, but at this moment, it was guided out, and its momentum could be described as earth-shattering. Above the altar, in the center of the formation, a white figure stood proudly, with his big sleeves fluttering in the wind. He was like an immortal descending to the world, and in the midst of the wind and clouds, the aura of an expert that looked down on the world was completely displayed. That person was the senior sword immortal of Guangqing Immortal Sect, Daoist Li Shong. In the sky, the demonic and demonic powers fought against each other. In the sky, the blood-colored demonic light and the green demonic aura collided violently, cancelling each other out. Mo Xing, who was returning from the 9 heavens, was blocked. In the sky above the sky-shattering valley, A majestic figure controlled an ancient altar and descended slowly from the sky. The three great Daoist sects took advantage of the temporary chaos caused by the Devil Star crashing into the seven baneful beasts to open the ruin heaven realm. The Devil Star's return was blocked above the 9 heavens, but nothing could stop the descent of the altar. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, Daoist Li Shong controlled the altar and descended from the sky. Boom! The huge altar landed in front of the stone wall, and the ground immediately surged like waves. Billowing smoke and dust swept in all directions, and on the ground, a huge formation appeared. Ji Yufei was shocked. It turned out that there was a formation below where they were just now. The huge formation and the mysterious runes were being activated by the descending altar. Everyone was shocked to find that the place where the altar landed was actually the formation eye of the formation on the ground. There was a formation within a formation, and there was a formation eye within a formation eye. Using an ancient altar as the formation eye of the formation was really extravagant. The array in front of the stone wall seemed to have been infused with an endless amount of divine power by the altar, and it began to emit a dazzling light. At this time, the stone door on the stone wall that had no reaction began to tremble. Roar! A tiger's roar shook the heavens and the earth. A white tiger emerged from the 4 corners of the formation, and with a sudden leap, it leaped into the sky. Everyone was extremely shocked. The appearance of the western white tiger seemed to connect the formation with the stars in the sky, and it received the power of the western white tiger's 7 constellations. The image of the white tiger seemed to have materialized, and it bared its fangs and brandished its claws, and its roar shook the heavens. Network, this seems to be the ancient 4 spirits divine formation. Shongqing sect's senior brother, Lin Xian, mumbled to himself as he stared at the roaring white tiger in the sky. The Shongqing sect's path was a combination of Taoist techniques and talismans. Arrays and talismans were the specialty of the Shongqing sect. In this world, there was not a single sect that dared to claim that they were better than the Shongqing sect when it came to arrays and talismans. As the senior brother of the Shongqing sect, Lin Xian has read countless books about arrays and talismans. When he activated this array and summoned the western white tiger, he recognized this array. It was no wonder he was so shocked. Because he also cultivated the 4 symbols technique. However, compared to the array before him, his Taoist techniques were nothing. Lin Xian's guess was right. The white tiger appeared, and the green dragon came out. With another dragon roar, a green dragon shadow rushed out from the east side of the formation diagram. It flew and circled in the sky east of the altar, drawing in the endless power of the stars from the east. The vermilion bird of the south and the black tortoise of the north appeared next and flew into the sky. The 4 ancient beasts received the power of the east, south, west, and west constellations. The entire array was activated. At once, inside the Valley of Cracks, the roar of a tiger, the roar of a dragon, and the cry of a phoenix shook the sky. The 4 beasts were positioned at the 4 corners of the altar and resonated with the array. They pushed the array's power to its peak. The entire valley and the entire mountain range began to shake. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Even the demonic stars in the sky and the 7 evils were overshadowed. The powerful energy fluctuations caused everyone's hearts to palpitate. The pressure emitted by the 4 divine beasts caused everyone to feel a great pressure. In front of the 4 divine beasts, they felt as if they were as weak as ants. The birds and beasts in the surrounding area were also stirred up at this moment, and all of them fled in panic in all directions. The roars of the 4 beasts shook heaven and earth. The powerful sound waves shook the mountains. Ji Yufei also felt his divine soul tremble. He felt a tightness in his chest, as if a huge rock was pressing down on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. At this moment, if a cultivator with an exceedingly high cultivation base were to observe the celestial phenomena, they would discover that the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise in the 4 directions were all emitting dazzling starlight. However, the starlight was overshadowed by the destructive starlight emitted by the 2 demonic stars in the sky. Those without cultivation would not be able to detect the abnormality of the 4 stars. Roar! How dare you! Demon King, what do you want? The people of the Tao sect have begun to open the ruin heaven realm, Outside the 100,000 mountain range, demonic clouds rolled and demonic chi blotted out the sky. Two figures were engaged in a fierce battle. One mountain peak after another crumbled under the powerful divine abilities of the two figures like they were made of paper. The demonic chi turned the area into a hell of azura. Cut the crap. Today, I'm going to kill you, you devil. A majestic voice came from the dark green demonic aura that was tumbling violently. Lunatic. The thousands of jong tall demonic shadow rushed into the sky. Without further confrontation, it abandoned its opponent and rushed into the mountain range. Where do you think you're going? The overwhelming demonic chi covered the sky and surged towards the demonic shadow. It was a life-and-death duel between demons and demons. This was a grudge that had lasted for thousands of years. It could not be resolved, and there was no way to resolve it unless one side was destroyed. The 4 stars have appeared in the 4 directions. Have the people of the Tao sect opened that mysterious world again? Such a question drifted out of Dragon Emperor City. In the heaven-splitting valley, on the high altar in front of the cliff, Daoist Li Shong was chanting a Daoist incantation and forming a hand seal, shooting immortal light towards the 4 immortal beasts in the sky. He poured the power of the altar into the 4 great divine beasts. Although the 4 great divine beasts were condensed by the formation and weren't real divine beasts, at this moment, the bodies of the 4 great divine beasts were incomparably real. A scale, a claw, a feather. Chaotic heaven and earth, connect all the realms. 4 spirits open the way. Ruin heavenly realm. A loud voice reverberated across the sky as if it came from the prehistoric times. Then, before everyone's eyes, the 4 mythical beasts above the altar howled at the same time. Their howls shook the heavens. Then, they turned into a ray of dazzling light that intertwined with each other and formed a giant ray of light. Then, they dashed towards the stone door on the wall. The expected loud sound didn't appear. The 4-colored immortal light penetrated the stone gate. Then, a layer of dense runes flashed across the stone gate before it returned to its original state. Ancient runes? Senior brother Lin Xian of the Shangqing sect was shocked again. Rumble. The ancient stone gate was shaking. After being sealed for 2 cycles of 60 years, it finally opened again. Everyone was extremely excited. Even the 2 old Taoists who had already stepped into the coffin were trembling with excitement as if they could fall at any time. However, no one dared to underestimate the 2 old Taoists. They weren't as weak as they looked. None of the people who could guard the origin of the 3 great Daoist sects were weak. The stone gate opened. Yes, although it was very slow, the stone gate was opening. There was no doubt about it. On the altar, Daoist Li Shong's white robe was already drenched in sweat. Daoist Li Shong's expression was extremely solemn. He stood in the core of the altar, constantly guiding the vast and boundless power of the altar, and then pouring it into the 4-colored divine light formed by the 4 divine beasts. The 4-colored immortal light seemed to pierce through the void and the barrier of the world. The endless immortal light directly broke the seal on the stone gate. It was as if an invisible hand was pushing the stone gate. Rumble. The stone gate made a loud noise that shook the heavens and the earth. An ancient aura seeped out from the gap that had already been opened. Bit by bit, the stone gate opened inward. When the 2 stone gates moved inward, it was as if 2 ancient divine mountains were moving. It was extremely strenuous.